start with the basics and build up to the fundamentals of this C++ programming language with the intention to make you a good C++ programmer. So in this lecture, we are going to just see the basic introduction to C++. We will see what is this C++ language, who designed it, when was it designed, and we will see the key features of this language, and we will see what are the main things that we are going to cover in this course. So once again, welcome to this course where we are going to learn about this wonderful language C++. Alright, so let's get started. So coming to the introduction to C++, C++ is a general purpose programming language. Now what do we mean by general purpose programming language? So general purpose programming language means it is a language that can be used for general purpose. That means it can be used for writing softwares in different domains. It can be used for writing softwares for different applications and different domains. So that is why we call it a general purpose programming language. Now C++ was designed and implemented by the Danish computer scientist Bjarne Stroustrup in 1979 at the Bell Labs. So this is the amazing person who have designed and implemented the C++ programming language. So you may have some idea about the C programming language. You must have heard at least about the C programming language. Now C++ is actually an extension of the C programming language with more features and is more powerful than the C programming language. So we will see the differences between C and C++ and we will see the more powerful features that are there in the C++ programming language as we move ahead in this course. Now C++ runs on a variety of platforms such as Windows, Mac OS and the various versions of Unix. So we see that C++ is supported on most of the major platforms that we have like Windows, Mac and Unix. So we can use it for a wide variety of applications for writing different softwares that can be used in different domains. Okay, now this is just a basic introduction to C++. So we see that it is a general purpose programming language.
And I may add, meron din siyang mobile platform. Ayan. Hindi lang tong platform ng Windows, Mac OS at saka yung sa Unix.
And we see who is the scientist who designed and implemented it. Now before we move ahead, here is a fun fact for you. The initial version of C++ was called C with classes. So as I already said, C++ is an extension of C. So we first had the C language and C++ was designed to have more features as compared to C. Now one of the major features that is there in C++ and not in C is the concept of classes. Now, because of that, before the term C++ was coined, the name given to C++ was actually C with classes. So that was the first name that was given and later on they decided to call it C++. Alright, so that is about the basic introduction to C++ along with a small fun fact for you. Alright, so as I just said, C++ is an extension of C. So let us talk a little more about that. So talking about C++ as an extension of C, C++ is actually a better C. So as I already said, C++ has more features and is more powerful as compared to C. So we can say that it is a better C and it supports data abstraction, it supports object-oriented programming and it supports generic programming. So if you are a person who is new to programming, then these terms may sound new to you and you may not understand it at the moment. So don't worry about it. We are going to make everything clear as we move ahead in this course. So for now, we are not going to explain or go into the details of these terms, but just know that C++ supports all these features that we have listed here. So that is why we say that it is a better C and it is more powerful as compared to the C programming language. Okay, so now let us take an example from the C language. So here I am taking a small example from the C language. So some of you may already know the C language and even if you don't know, no problem at all. So in this example, let I be an integer variable whose value is equal to 6. Now again, if you are new to programming, you may not understand the meaning of this term variable and what do we mean by I is an integer and all that. So it's totally fine. For now, just understand that we are having a variable. Now what is a variable? Variable is something that can hold a value. So just think of variable as something that can hold a value. Now I is a variable which is an integer. Now integer means the same kind of integer that we have in mathematics. So I is a variable that can hold an integer value. So that's what we mean here. And what is the value? The value is equal to 6. So that means I is equal to 6. Now I plus plus will increment the value by 1. Now this plus plus, if you put this plus symbol 2 times after this I, that signifies an increment operator in C. Now what is an increment operator? The increment operator will increase the value by 1. So I plus plus is an increment operator and it will increase the value and make I is equal to 7, because the previous value of I was equal to 6. So 6 plus 1 equal to 7. So that is what the increment operator or this plus plus operator does. Now why are we discussing this? We are discussing this because I want to emphasize the fact that the term C++ was coined because of this particular reason. So we saw that plus plus is an increment operator, and because of that C++ was chosen to denote it being the next or the successor or increment of the C programming language. So we said that C++ is an extension of C, and the name C++ was chosen in order to denote that it is the next or the successor or an increment of the C programming language. So that is why I wanted to discuss this small example to tell you why this plus plus is there after this C, making it C++. Okay, so now let's discuss the prerequisites that we need to know before learning the C++ programming language. Alright, so coming to the prerequisites, let us ask ourselves some few questions. Do I need to have prior knowledge of C to learn C++? So in the previous slide, we have just seen that C++ is actually an extension of C. So do you need to have any prior knowledge of C in order to learn C++? The answer is no, you don't need to know C to learn C++. So if you already know C, that is well and good, but even if you don't know it, it is totally fine, because C++ in itself is a complete programming language, and we are going to start from scratch and discuss everything right from the basics. So you don't need to have any prior knowledge of C in order to learn C++. And then, do I need to know any other programming languages before learning C++? So apart from C, is there any other programming languages that you need to know before learning C++? Again, the answer is no. You don't need to know any other programming languages before learning C++. So if you have chosen C++ as your first programming language, it is totally fine, because we are going to learn everything, as I said, from scratch. So we will start from the basics and cover each and everything that is required in order to learn this language. So again, if this is your first programming language, you have made a good choice in choosing this as your first programming language. So we see that basically there are no prerequisites in order to learn C++. You can just learn it from whatever position that you are right now. Okay, now let's take a look at the syllabus. Okay, so coming to the syllabus, we will see what are the main things that we are going to discuss in this course. Okay, so here are the list of the basic topics that we are going to discuss in this course. So first of all, we will see the introduction. So this lecture is also a part of the introduction, and we will see some more basic things that we need to learn before we get into the details of C++. So that will be discussed in the introduction, and then we will study about the variables and basic types. So don't worry about these terms that are written here. If you are new to programming, it will all become clear as we move ahead. So just know that we are going to discuss these things. So after variables and basic types, we are going to discuss about strings, vectors and arrays. Then we will see the different kind of expressions that we have, then the different kind of statements that we have, and then we will study about functions, and then we will also study about classes. So we see that classes, as we already saw in the first slide, is one of the features that is there in C++, which was not there in C. So this is an important feature of C++ which we need to study, and this is also a topic that will make us ready to learn the object-oriented programming approach. So after classes, we will see the input-output library, then we will study about the overloaded operations and conversions, and we will also study about the object-oriented programming. So as I said, don't worry even if these topics seem alien to you at the moment. If you are new to programming, we are going to study and make everything clear in this course. So basically, these are the main things that are going to be covered in this course. Now coming to the target audience, who are the target audience for this course? So you may already have an idea because I said about this in the first slide itself. So first of all, anyone who is having C++ as a part of their university or college curriculum, you're welcome to learn using this course. And then anyone who wants to learn the C++ programming language. So if you are just a casual learner, or if you want to learn the details of this programming language, or if you want to even just brush up some concepts, this course is for you. So basically, anyone who wants to learn the C++ programming language can make use of this course. Alright, so that was about the basic introduction to C++. I hope you got an idea of what is C++ programming language, how it is an extension of C, and what are the things that we are going to study in this course and who are the target audience. So I hope we will have a wonderful journey in learning and teaching this course together. So I hope this introductory lecture.
Okay, next.
Before we were
Hello everyone and welcome back. In the previous lecture we have seen the introduction to C++ programming, and in this lecture we are going to learn about how to write a simple C++ program. So there are many things that are there that we need to know about while coding in C++. So here in this lecture we will study about the very basics, and we will see what are the main or the basic things that are there that we need to know in writing a simple C++ program. Okay, so let's get started. So coming to writing a simple C++ program, the first thing that we need to know is about functions. Now let's see what is a function. Every C++ program contains one or more functions, one of which must be named main. Now if you are new to programming, you may not know what is the meaning of function, but if you already have some idea about programming, then you may know what a function is. So we are going to study about detail in function in the coming lectures, but for now just understand that function is nothing but it's a block of code that is going to perform some operation. Okay, so every program in C++ must contain at least one function, and one of the function must be named main. So this is very important. The main function is one of the most important functions, and the operating system runs a C++ program by calling main. So whenever you run a C++ program, the first function that is going to be called is the main function. So from the name itself, just try to understand what is main. Main means it is the main thing. So the main function is going to be called first whenever we run a program in C++. Okay, so keeping that in mind, let us see the structure of a main function, how it looks like, and what are the things it contains. So here we see a simple version of main that does nothing but return a value to the operating system. Now what does this mean? Let's see. So here in this block, we see it is written int main, and there are two brackets, and then here within curly braces it is written return 0. So this is nothing but the main function that we are talking about. Now within this main function, this is the body of the function, and it is doing nothing but it is just returning a value to the operating system. And what is it returning? It is returning 0. Now again, if you are new to programming, you may not understand what is this returning concept. So don't worry about it, everything will become clear. But here what we are just trying to emphasize is the structure of the main function. Okay, so we saw that there are quite a few things inside this function. So let us just break them down and try to understand what are each of the things written in this function block one by one. So we will discuss about the elements of a function definition, which we have seen in the previous slide. So a function definition has 4 elements. So let's see what they are. So first of all, we have a return type. So we will see what that is. Then we have a function name, which is the name of the function. Then we have a parameter list enclosed in parentheses, which can also be empty. Okay, and then the next thing that we have is a function body. So keeping these things in mind, let's take a look at that code that we saw in the previous slide and try to identify these elements. Okay, so here is the code, and here we see that in the first line we have int and main, and we have the parentheses. So this int that is written here, which stands for integer, is the return type. Now what do we mean by return type? So again, as I said, we will study about this in detail as we move ahead, but for now just remember that a function will return something to the operating system. And what is it? It can be anything depending upon the function definition. Now what type of data is it going to return? That is specified by the return type. So here it is written int, which stands for integer. That means what this function is going to return is an integer type. Then we have this main, which is a function name. So main is the name of the function. So as I already said, this main is a function that has to be there in every C++ program that we write. Now you can also define your own functions, and you can give your own names to that functions. So this part is the function name. And here we have the parameter list. So parameter list is also also something that we will discuss later when we study about functions. So parameter list will contain the arguments that can be taken by that function. So again, if you are new, you may not understand what is this arguments. So don't worry about it. Just try to focus on this main function right now. So as it is written here, it can also be empty like it is shown in the example here. So here we see that this parenthesis is empty. So the parameter list is actually empty. And then within this curly braces, we have the function body, which defines the operation that the function is going to perform. So what does this function do here? It does nothing, but it just returns a value which is 0. Now what is this return? So as I said, the function has to return something to the operating system. So in this case, it is just returning 0. So it will depend upon the function definition as of what it is going to return. So here it is just returning 0 because we just have to return something. And here we saw that the return type was an integer. So we see that it is returning 0 and 0 is an integer. So whatever this function returns, it must be of the type integer. So that is why return 0 is written, which is an integer. So this is just a small example showing the elements of a function definition. Okay, but this is not a complete program. It is just a block of function that we have seen. So we want to write a complete C++ program. So let's see, using these things that we have learned, how can we write a complete C++ program? So here we will see the example of a complete C++ program. Okay, so here in this block here, I have the complete C++ program. So here we see that it starts with something called hash include, and within angle brackets it is written IOStream. So we are going to study about all these things in detail in the coming lectures. So don't worry about it. So just know that this is the header for now. Then here we have something called using namespace std, which will also be discussed in another lecture. And here we see the main function that we have discussed in this lecture. So here we have this integer main, and within the curly braces we have the statements which shows what this function is performing. So here it is written cout, and it is written here welcome to the C++ world. Now what does this mean? Cout stands for console output, and it is used for printing something on the screen in a C++ program. So this is the syntax cout, and you have to give two angle brackets that opens to the right, and within double quotes you have to write the string that you want to print on the screen, and then you have to end it with a semicolon. So this is the syntax of printing something on a screen in a C++ program. Alright, and then as we already discussed, the integer main function has to return something, and that should be an integer. So it is returning 0, which is an integer. So here again, the purpose of this program is to just print something on the screen, which is welcome to the C++ world. But it is mandatory to return something. So because of that, we are just returning 0. Okay, so if you run this program, you will get the output welcome to the C++ world printed on your screen. So that is how a complete C++ program is written. So this is just a simple example, and as we move ahead in this course, I am going to show you how to actually install the compiler and how to use the source code editor in order to write the programs in a proper way, and then we will see how to compile and run the programs. So we are going to practically see and learn how things are happening, and that is the method that we are going to follow in this course. But for this example, I'm not going to go to the compiler because this is just an example to show how a complete C++ program looks like. So anyway, this is complete, and if you just write the same thing and compile and run it, you are going to get this output on your screen. Right, now we studied about functions. Now another thing that we need to know about in a C++ program is known as types. So let's see what are types. So coming to types, types are one of the most fundamental concepts in programming. Now what do they mean? A type defines both the contents of code editor in order to write the programs in a proper.
Okay. So may nakita nyo ba yung sinend ko sa GC?
Yes po.
Okay, so i-try natin para makita na natin yung since first time natin gagamitin yung MS Team at gagamitin natin yung mga compilers natin para makita na natin yung mga magiging issue ng presentation natin. So i-try muna natin. I-code natin tong niload ko na welcome to C++ world. At gusto kong makita para ma-troubleshoot na natin kung ano yung magiging issue pagka nag-present kayo, no? Using MS Team. Sige, para ready na tayo dire-diretso pagka nag-start na tayo ng practice, no? Sige, paki-code lang, tapos ako rin magko-code, tapos bago tayo magdire-diretso. Okay. Saan yung akin ano? 1-3. Ayan. Copy. Alright. Nilabas ko na siya sa DevC. Okay. Iran natin. Okay, tapos pag nag-save tayo, makikita nyo, so ano nang pipiliin natin? Yung nakalagay C++ source files, no? .cpp. Kasi, ano na yan, C++, no? Ayan, save ko lang. Ayan. Ayan. Okay, so, okay na ako. Wala nang problema yung ano ko. Okay, tingnan ko nga. Share nga natin yung ating ano, screen natin. Right. Okay. Simulan natin. Sino to? May bago tayo. I-admit. Si Casey. Si Casey, gustong mauna. Sige, Casey, tingnan nga natin. Mag-chat po tayo, pakilagay para natitrace natin yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng mga ready na. Pakilagay yung ano nyo. Done na raw siya. So, unahin natin si Casey kasi nakita natin siya nagtaas ng kamay. Tapos susundan siya ni... Sino yun? Para sunod-sunod na. Ni Christina. Okay.
Nakikita po ba?
Ayan. So, sige. Try na natin. Para ngayon pa lang, ma-troubleshoot na natin, no? Sige, run mo. Naka-online ka. Okay. Hello world. Okay. Anong pangalan nito? Online GDB. Okay.
DOSBox po.
Sige. Pero, makakagamit ka na ba nung naka-install? Hopefully.
Yes po.
Okay.
Mas mabilis lang po kasi yung process ng pagra-run dito ng program, kaya po ito po muna ginagamit ko. Pero pag po yung mga mas complex po na
Doon tayo
program
sa
pwede
ano.
po,
Ano bang plano mong
yung
gamitin?
application. DevC po.
DevC. Okay. Sige. Salamat. Ayan. Sunod na tayo kay Maria Cristina Provido. Ayan. Siya yung nauna dito sa ano, sa chat. Yan na natin, no? Para makita natin yung mga issues habang tayo ay baba ko nga ito. Wag na. Tama na.
Kita na po, ma'am.
Di pa. Ayan. So, dapat ang ano mo, ang share mo, yung ano dito parang, yung nakalagay screen. Para ano, wala pa kasing lumilitaw. Sige, try mo ulit yung screen. Ayan. Okay, good. Sige. I-run mo nga. Ayan. Okay. So, okay, good. Ayan. So, nakikita na natin. Pwede na, no? Para matanggal na natin yung mga issue ng problema ng ano. Si Beatrice, next. O bakit nag-post ka, Russell? Hindi ka ba pwedeng mag-show?
May nakikita na po.
Oo, meron na. Sige, i-run mo. Ayan. Okay, good. Good. Salamat. Next, si Paula. Teka. Ayan, si Paula. Okay, sige, run. Okay, si Paula Lea ang ano. Okay. Okay. Ayan, binago ni Paula. Okay, thank you, Paula. Right, next, si Jerome. Sa ID. Ay, meron pala akong gustong mabago sana, class. Kasi 'di ba meron tayong sige lang, i-run mo, Jerome. Meron tayong issue na yung iba hindi makapag-post. Ano kaya ang pwede nating hindi makapag-post na katulad nito na live, no? Gusto ko sana lahat live pwedeng show ng kanilang nagawa. Ano kaya ang pwede nating maging solusyon para halimbawa katulad nitong si Russell, mukhang si Russell hindi makakapag-post ng ano. Russell, ano bang pwede mong magawa para part ka nung mga nagpo-post online? Okay, salamat Jerome. Ayan, okay na siya. So gusto ko sana lahat pwedeng yung live na nagpo-post ng gawa nila. Ito ngang iba, instead na dahil walang installation sa PC, gumagamit sila ng mobile. Baka pwedeng mong gawing mobile yung presentation mo, Russell. Para sa PC yan, ang ibig sabihin, hindi mo mai-online yung PC mo. Mukhang hindi ba kayang i-tether? Di ba yung tether, ganun yung concept? Ng okay. Si Sienna. Sienna, anong nangyari? Teka, hindi pa ako tumatawag. Si Winmark. Si Jerome tapos na. Sandali lang, Sherilyn. Si Winmark yung yung kasunod. Meron tayong pila. Kung mag-alala, tatawagin kita, ha? Sige.
Napindot lang po, sorry po.
Nagulat ako, hindi pa ako tumatawag eh. Ayan, si Winmark. Okay. Okay lang. Ayos lang yan, para makita natin yung ating tool na ginagamit, no? Ayan, okay. Salamat. Salamat, Winmark. Ayan. Medyo bibilisan natin at yung ating kaklase gusto na mag-post. Ayan. Kenneth. Sige, tingnan natin. Ito, mobile ang nito, no? Mobile ang niya. Admit natin to si Carlo. Okay.
Kita na po.
Oo, kita na. Sige. Okay. Alright. Okay, salamat. Salamat. Diba? Gusto ko sana ganyan kayo lahat, no? Yung live na nagpa-participate, no? Pero baka pwede natin gawa ng paraan yung mga nasa no? Makapag-participate. Ano kaya pwede nilang gawin? Pwede siguro katulad nitong nina Kenneth, naka-mobile. Ayan. Yun lang naman, suggestion ko lang naman. Okay, next, si Justin. Justin May, Empleo. Ayan. Okay, naka-devc siya. Okay, good. Okay, admit natin to si Russell. Admitting. Ayan, nandiyan na si Russell. Okay, thank you. Alright, next, si Josiah. Josiah, patingin. Para maano na natin, no? Para dire-diretso tayo. Ready na raw yun sa kanya.
Share screen po ba, ma'am?
Oo, share screen. Ayan, admit natin to si Castillo. Alam mo na bang mag-share screen? Yan. Para ma-practice na natin. Ito, nakalagay doon, no? Yung share screen.
Ayaw po, ma'am. Ayaw mag-share screen, ma'am.
Teka lang. Ito, nakikita mo yon. Ayun, no? Share.
Hindi po, ayaw lang po share screen talaga ng mismo.
Ano ba?
Nawawala po bigla.
Ano yung mo? Ano yung gamit mo?
PC po.
PC. O bakit mawawala yung share screen? Dapat meron yan. Ito nakalagay yung katabi ng lead. Tapos pag clinic mo yan, katulad nito, ayan i-click mo yung screen dito. Nakikita mo ba itong ko? Naka ba ako? Hindi ako naka-share screen, Teka, ha? I-share ko lang. Okay, ayan. So, ganito yan. Ganito lang yan, iho. Okay. So, from here, nakikita nyo ba yung screen ko? Baka na.
Yes
Josiah,
po.
nakikita mo yung screen. Okay, so ito nakalagay, ayan, yung naka-X na yan, ibig sabihin, nag-share kasi ako ngayon, no? So, kung iaano ko yan, i-unshare ko, may makikita ka. Makikita mo, ayan, so naka-unshare ako ngayon. Okay, nakalagay doon, share content, no? So, pagbaba niyan, may nakalagay presenter mode, no? I-click mo lang yung screen, no? Ayan, yung screen. So, pag nag-share ako, share ko ulit. Ayan, share screen. So, ito yung screen ko ngayon, no? Naka C++. Ayan. O, sige nga. Bakit? Dapat na, kaya nga, ito yung tinotroubleshoot na natin para alam natin kung anong problema. O, sige, anong problema?
Naka-browser lang po ako, ma'am.
Naka-browser ka.
Opo, naka-browser lang po ako, ma'am. Sa browser lang po ito.
Di ba pwede rin naman yun?
Pwede naman po, kaso ayaw lang po mag-share screen ngayon. Titingnan ko pa po. Kasi kada pindot ko po na mag-share na mismo po. Nagsasabi dun sa baba, stop sharing ka. Nawawala yung stop sharing para pop-up po na para makita mo po na nag-share screen po. Bigla rin po nawawala.
Okay. Medyo hyper yung yung browser mo. Ibig sabihin yan, okay, ang gawin mo, linisin mo yung mga extension dyan sa browser, dun sa setting ng browser. Ano bang browser mo? Google?
Opera GX po.
Opera. Okay, so i-clean mo kasi marami sigurong nakadikit na extension para dyan sa games mo. Di yung lang, bawasan mo lang, no? Para usually kasi pagka masyadong hyper yung meron siyang very active na dyan, na app na ginagamit mo para dyan sa Opera. So, bawasan mo lang para yung speed ng hindi makasabay yung yung MS Team. Yan yung niyan, no? So,
sige po, try ko po.
troubleshoot mo muna yan. Sige. Okay, so yan yung mga sinasabi ko, no? Ngayon pa lang tinitingnan na natin para kung ano man yung magiging problema pag nagpe-present kayo. Ayan. Ma-resolve na natin. Okay. So, si Josiah. Next, si Edson. Anyana. Admit natin tong si Nicole. Ayan. Okay. EA. Okay. Ayan, yung desktop mo na. Okay. Ayan. Okay, run. Ayan, okay na. Sige, good. Okay. Salamat, Edson. Okay, next, si Jessica Berdida. Naka-online ka. Ayan. Okay. Jessica, next time pagka sana makagamit tayo ng kung ano man ang sa PC natin, no? Kung ano man yung mapagpilian mo doon sa sinabi ko kanina na 22 ba yun o 32? Ayan, para
Yes po, ma'am.
Oo. Para Okay, next si Giancarlo Reyes.
Okay na po ba, ma'am?
Teka lang, sandali. Okay, so, okay. Ayan, yan ang gusto ko, no? May mga binabago, no? Merong, hindi lang sa no? Pasok na pasok yan. Sige, load mo nga, tingnan natin kung anong lalabas. So, ayan. So, niya na yung paggamit ng C++. Medyo mabagal lang ang output. Ayun, okay. So, yun yung mga spaces. Ayan. Salamat. Admit natin to. Okay, next. Giancarlo. Zerilyn, ayan, ikaw na. Terilyn. Ayun. Ay, naka-video.
Ma'am, okay lang po ba kung i-open ko yung cam ko po and then i-show ko na lang po yung nasa laptop?
Pwede rin. Sige na nga. Sige na nga. Sige. Tingnan natin kung paano,
Sige po.
paano pagka sa MS Team, ano. Tingnan nga, paano ginagawa sa MS Team. Sige. Ayun. Ah, okay. So, solong-solo niya yung, ano, yung screen. I-ano mo ng konti yung zoom. Iwasan mo ng konti yung zoom. Ayan. Okay. So, dito sa kabilang side. Para makita natin. Ayan, nandun. Ang nakikita lang namin yung cam. Ayan. Ayan,
Wait
urong
lang
pa.
po.
Ayan, urong pa ng konti. Okay. Ayan. Okay. Sige, okay din lang yan. At least nakikita ko. Ayan. Hello world. C++ world. Okay, salamat. So, yun yung solusyon natin para kasama kayo dun sa ano, no? Sa online presentation. Ito na si Russell. Nasa GC na raw. Ayan, balik ako dun sa tanong ko, Russell. Ano ba yung way na pwede nating magawa para kasama ka dun sa online na presentation? Ito, nakikita ko na nga yung ano mo. Ano ba yung pwede nating magawa? Sino to? Si Russell. O, pwede naman palang online, Russell. O, ano? Sige, ilabas mo yung ano mo. Pwede naman pala eh. Ayun. Oh, kayang-kaya naman pala. Ayan. Sige, compile. Ayan. Yan ang gusto ko na live tayo na ano. O, diba? Ayan. Salamat, Russell. Ayan. Yan ang gusto ko. Ganyan dapat. Okay. Next. Gilwin. Para makita na natin yung mga issues kasi bago yung tool ang gamit natin. Ayan. Si Gilwin, ang gamit niya ay Debsy. Okay. File and run. Ayan. Okay, good. Alright. Sige. Next, si Joaquin. Sebastian. Ay, ang bilis. Joaquin? Makol.
Ma'am, nakikita na po.
Ayan, sige. Yung
Okay
ano
na
na, yung app mo na. Ayan, okay. Sige, compile. Ayun, okay na. Sige, thank you. Salamat. Salamat, Makol. Okay, next, si Francel Malabanan. Ayan, si Francel. Okay. Tapos run. Okay. Salamat, Francel. O, si Benji. Ito si Benji. Ano to eh. Nagpo-post to sa ano. Paano kaya ang gagawin ni Benji para...
Ma'am,
Oh.
open ko na lang po yung cam. Parang ginawa po rin kanina.
Ah, okay. O, sige
Okay.
nga. Sige nga.
Kita na po, ma'am.
Oo, nakabaliktad ako. Ayan. O, tapos si run mo. Ayun.
Nakabaliktad po ba? Okay.
Hindi, okay na. Ayun, na ano na. Ayan,
Ah,
okay. Tapos, i-ano mo siya. Ano pangalan nito? Compile and run. Ayan.
Ayan po.
Ayun. Okay, good. Ayan, gusto ko yung ganyan. Sige, kahit na pag ganyan, pwede yan. At least, nandyan na kayo. Right, next, si Joanna Mika Villegas.
Kita na po ba?
Tatay. Naduduling ako. parang nagiging Christmas light yan. Hindi ka wala. Alisin mo yung ano. Alisin mo yung ano. Na ano yung ano mo, yung mouse mo na trap doon sa ano. Sige, ulit. Napansin nyo ba na parang Christmas light, class? Ganon din? O ako lang ang nakakita ng ano. O sige, sabi na nga ba.
Opo. Sorry po, ma'am. Okay po siya sa akin eh. Ano pong nangyayari?
Ewan, na-stuck siguro yung mouse mo doon sa ano sa app. Kaya ganon, para siyang Christmas light. Pero anyway, sige ulit. Ayan. 'Di ba? Sabi sa iyo na-stuck lang 'yun eh. O,
Okay
sige.
na po.
Okay na. Compile mo. Ayan. Okay. Salamat. Salamat.
Thank you rin po.
Okay, next si Borigas. Okay. Anta na si Joanna. Ayan na, si Borigas. Okay. Ayan. So, troubleshoot natin. Ano nangyayari, Joanna? JB lang yung nakikita ko. Ayan. Gawin mo yung ano, yung screen mismo. Ayan. Okay. O, diba? Sige. Lagay mo dito ng konti para makita natin yung ano. Ayan. Okay. So meron kang parang smiley dyan sa dulo. Okay. Curious lang ako. Salamat, Joanna Borregas. Okay, next. Si Bermeo. John James. Yan. Sige. Compile. And run. Ayun. Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. Responsive yung ano niya. Salamat. Next, si Christine Joy Milan. Ayan. Okay. Ayun. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next, si Kim. Kim, shalom. Oduhan. Right. Okay, nandiyan ka na. Sige, i-run mo muna. Ayun, okay. Right. Tagal lumitaw Ayun, okay. Lumitaw na. Okay. Thank you. Right, next, si Rainiel. This on. Okay, ano? Oh, ano nangyari? Hindi pa nag-run. Ayan, sige. Try mong i-compile, tsaka i-run. Oh, ba't tinaduhan mo agad? Hindi pa tapos. Hindi ko pa nakikita yung compile mo. Ulit, ate. Miss Dison, balik. Balik. Ano nangyari? Ano nangyari kay Dison na wala? Ayan. Sige. Compile. Okay. Sige, click mo na. Ayan. Tama, yun nga. Sige, click mo. Ang galaw naman ng mouse mo. Ayan. Okay. Thank you, Rainiel. Kinakabahan ba yung mouse mo? Okay, next si Kalin. Kalin ang naiba. Si Kalin ang naiba. Katapos ni Kalin, si Jigs. KP.
Kita na po.
KP pa rin lang ang nakikita ko.
Ay, KP pa rin.
Okay.
Wait lang po.
Yung screen. Pili mo yung screen. Pag nag-show.
Wait lang po ah.
Sige.
Yeah. Ay.
So, diba? Maganda talaga sinisimulan natin ng ganyan para pag sa susunod dire-diretso na, no? O, troubleshoot natin kung ano yung problema. Okay, so i-run mo nga, iho.
Yeah.
Ayun, okay. Thank you. Okay, so si Jigs naman. Followed by China. China May. Kata si Jigs. Nasa si Jigs? Ayan na si Jigs. Let's jig into it. Wala pa, Jigs. Ano meron? Ano nangyayari sa'yo, Jigs? Ayan. Ayan na. Lumitaw na. Okay. Ayan. So, Deb C. Okay. Compile and run. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jigs. Alright. Next, si China. China May.
Kita na po, ma'am.
Oo, kita na. Sino ba yung nakahiga na yan? Sa damo?
Wallpaper lang po.
Wala lang, nakakaaliw lang. Parang ang ganda. Ayan. C++. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, China. Next, si Chester. Sarap ng higa nila, no? Ayan. Chester. Ikaw na ba yan, Chester? Oo, ikaw na nga. Wala pa. Okay. Antayin lang natin. Medyo mabagal siguro net nito. Oh, ano nangyari? Ay, ayun. Ayan. Okay, good. Sige. And then, compile and run. Ayun. Okay. Hello lang. Hello lang talaga, no? O, sige. Hello rin. Salamat, Chester. Next, si Kent. Si Kent Harvey.
Wait lang po, ma'am.
Sige.
Kita na po.
So, naka-mobile ka. Okay, sige. Ayan. Okay. Ayun. Ayun. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. Next, si Alexandra. Buong-buo, ano? Alexandra. Si Alex. Okay. And then, compile and run. Ayun. Salamat. Salamat. Salamat, Alex. Ayan. Ainit. Okay, next. Si Kiana. Kiana Nicole. Okay. Sige, pakiran. Ayun, okay. Salamat. Salamat, salamat. C++. Angelo. Jan Angelo Basco next.
Wait lang po, ma'am.
Sige. Siya ay susundan ni Gwyneth.
Okay na po.
Sige, pakiran. Ayan. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jan Angelo. Next, si Gwyneth. Alam ko si Gwyneth naka-ano rin to eh. Naka-mobile to eh. Tama, Gwyneth? Dato. Si Miss Dato. Ikaw na next. Ayan. Okay. Anong gamit nga ulit nito? Anong gamit mo? Parang pareho kayo ni Kenneth, ano? Ng gamit. Okay. Sige. Okay. Thank you. Kita na natin. Salamat, Gwyneth. Next, sige ano? Si Kyla. Michelle Kyla. Ang dami tayong Lopez. Michelle. Ang dilim ko. Ayun. Okay. Sige, pakiran. Ayun. Okay. Thank you. Alright, next. Si Ashley. 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 Ayan na, si Ashley. Naka-mobile din si Ashley. Okay. Ayun. Okay, nara na siya. Thank you, Ashley. Ayan. Alright, next, si Luis. Luis Gabriel. Dumudulas ako. Okay.
Okay na po ba, ma'am?
Di pa. Ano ka, naka-mobile din? Or naka-ano? PC?
Opo.
Naka-mobile. Sige. Try mo lang na i-share. Hindi pa siya lumilitaw or baka mabagal lang. Wala pang lumilitaw. Meron na ba kayong nakikita, class? Wala pa, no? Wala pa. Ako kasi wala pa nakikita. Baka kayo meron.
Sige po.
Ay, wait lang. Sandali lang bago ka bago mo pag-eksperimentohan yan, ano? Tayo, so habang ginagawa mo yan, bigyan natin ng trabaho si Tayone. Yung ating taga-check ng time. Okay. Buksan ko lang yung ating oras. Kasi i-ready na rin natin yung ating break. Kasi alam kong gustong i-remind sa atin ni Tayone yung break. Tayone, nandiyan ka ba? Nandiyan ba si Tayone? Tayone, magparamdam ka.
Si Tayone.
Absent?
Papa, may pinuntahan daw po.
Bakit naman gala ng gala yan si Tayone? Paano yan? Siya yung magre-remind ng natin, ng break natin. Okay, so tayo ay nag-i-start ng 1:30, tapos mag-e-end tayo ng 6:30. Right, so tayo ay magbe-break saan? Mag-break tayo ng 3:00. Pwede? Tama? Pwede, no? 3:00. 1-3. Okay. Okay ba sa inyo yun? Mag-break tayo ng 3:00. Wala na tayong break. Dahil 3:30 na. Hindi tayo nag-break. Anyway, so next meeting, sayang kasi dire-diretso na tayo, no? So next meeting, sabihin nyo kay Tayone, Siya yung magre-remind ng break natin. Tayo ay every Thursday. So, alas 3 yung break. Siguro mga 30 minutes. After, balik tayo ng 30 minutes. Ayan. So, 3:30. Okay. So, yun yung ating arrangement. Which is, gusto nyo ba ang ano? Oh, sayang din. Mag-break na rin tayo, no? Balik tayo ng alas 4. Okay lang? Okay lang ba, class? Para ano? Makapag-break din kayo. No? Okay. So,
Ma'am, dati po, nung first sem po, 4:30 to 5:30 po yung break.
oo nga, medyo mahaba-haba. Kaso maiksi lang yung oras natin ngayon Ayan. Bali, dati dalawang yung ating, ka nga. Oo nga, no? Half a day to. O sige, isang oras. Sorry. O nga pala, isang araw lang to Minahanap ko kasi kung meron pa sa ibang araw Isang araw lang tayo every Thursday, tama? Tama ba?
Yes po.
Oo. So, sige,
Yes po,
gawin natin isang oras. Okay, so, next time, tayo ay, paki-remind na lang si Tayone, mula alas 3 hanggang alas 4. For now, ang gawin natin, so, yan ay 3:30 na, so, tayo ay babalik ng 4:30. Okay ba? Okay ba, class? So, 3:30 to 4:30. Ayan. Yan, 1 hour. O, sige, break muna tayo. Okay? Pagbalik natin, sana ready na si okay na si Sino ba yung nagpe-present kanina? Sino yun?
Ako po.
Sino yun? Si Luis. O, sana pagbalik natin, okay na ha? Sige, ready mo na. Okay, break muna tayo. Balik kayo ng 4:30. Sige. Okay. Buti na alala.
Okay po, ma'am.
Sige. Si Tayone ba ay babalik or buong araw na wala? Habol? Ay, wala na. Naka-break na sila. Sige, mag-break na muna kayo. Mamaya na lang. Okay. Chan Lloyd Dugo. Okay, naka-mute. So, busy muna tayo. Maganda. Teka, ipopost ko to. Ayan na yung kay Joy. Okay. Okay. Alright, meron siya mga inilagay na bago dun. Sin. FF. Okay. Right. Okay, thank you, Joy. Si next, si Joanna Patricia. Alright. Okay, pakiran. Okay, good. Ayan. Alright. Okay, next, si Juan Miguel Santiago. Ching. Natin si Bermeo. Okay, pakiran po. Ayan, nagra-run na. Ayun. Okay. Thanks, Juan Miguel. O sige, patingin nga yung kay Josiah kung okay na. Josiah. Get natin kung Sienna. Try natin. Bisaya, baka okay na. Para next time, alam na natin ang gagawin natin, no? Sige. Okay. Ga-unhook lang ako ng mga nakadikit. Hindi po mga bagal ako Dali lang Babawas lang ako ng devices. Okay. Ito hindi na nakakonect. Ito ba nakakonect pa? Hindi na. Ito. Nakakonect. Lobat. Lobat siya. Hindi yan nakakonect. Okay. Na-resource ko na lahat ng pwedeng tanggalin. Ay, nako. Ano nangyari? Labi. Okay. Okay, balik tayo. Ano nangyari kay Josiah? Josiah? Tinatry mo na ba? Hindi ka makapasok, Sherilyn. Si Sherilyn hindi makapasok. In-admit ko na. Offline si Josiah. Offline si Josiah. Okay, so skip muna natin si Josiah. Next, si Jules. Jules. Andaya. Natin balikan. Offline siya Okay, na-admit na si Okay, paki-compile and run. Ayan. Okay. Right. Thank you, Jules. Next, si Basco.
Ma'am, tapos na po kanina. Akala ko po, di nyo lang nakita yung
Ay,
message ko.
okay. Kasi may, sorry. Nag-comment ka kasi dito. Akala ko nawala sa isip ko. Natapos ka na nga pala. Okay, si ano na to. Break natin 5:30, ma'am. Okay. Hindi. Okay, so nagano na tayo. Tapos na tayo ng break. Okay. So, ano nangyari na kay Josiah? Josiah, naka-offline ka. Paano natin matitest? Okay, balikan ka. Pagbalik, Josiah, bumalik ka. Naka-offline ka. Okay. Right. Ayan. See more. Diba? Oo nga, naka-offline siya. Okay. Anyway, alright, so balikan na lang natin si Josiah. Balikan natin yung ating pinapanood kanina, no? Tuloy natin. So, dito tayo sa, ayan. Okay, so ito yung huli nating pinapanood kanina. Tuloy lang natin.
Way, and then we will see how to compile and run the programs. So we are going to practically see and learn how things are happening, and that is the method that we are going to follow in this course. But for this example, I'm not going to go to the compiler because this is just an example to show how a complete C++ program looks like. So anyway, this is complete, and if you just write the same thing and compile and run it, you are going to get this output on your screen. Right, now we studied about functions. Now another thing that we need to know about in a C++ program is known as types. So let's see what are types. So coming to types, types are one of the most fundamental concepts in programming. Now what do they mean? A type defines both the contents of data element and the operations that are possible on those data. Okay, so type specifies what type of data element that is and what are the types of operations that can be performed on those data. So in the previous slide when we discussed about the main function, we saw that it was having a return type of integer. So there we saw the concept of type already. So it means that the value that is going to be returned must be of the type integer. So every function will have a return type, and similarly even variables will have types. Now what are variables? We will of course study about them in detail, but just remember for now that variables are something that are used for storing values. So even for variables we have to mention or specify what type of variable they are.
Wait lang. Diyan ka lang uulitin ko lang ito hanggang dito. Ayan, hanggang dyan. Sorry naman, hindi ko na-press siguro yung yung sound doon sa Okay. So, i-unshare natin. Buti sinabi ni Ayun, eto hindi natin na-press to. Ayun. Okay, balik tayo.
And as we move ahead in this course, I am going to show you how to actually install the
meron na?
Meron na po.
Ayan,
Thank you.
compiler and how to use a source code editor in order to write the programs in a proper way, and then we will see how to compile and run the programs. So we are going to practically see and learn how things are happening, and that is the method that we are going to follow in this course. But for this example, I'm not going to go to the compiler because this is just an example to show how a complete C++ program looks like. So anyway, this is complete, and if you just write the same thing and compile and run it, you are going to get this output on your screen. Right, now we studied about functions. Now another thing that we need to know about in a C++ program is known as types. So let's see what are types. So coming to types, types are one of the most fundamental concepts in programming. Now what do they mean? A type defines both the contents of data element and the operations that are possible on those data. Okay, so type specifies what type of data element that is and what are the types of operations that can be performed on those data. So in the previous slide when we discussed about the main function, we saw that it was having a return type of integer. So there we saw the concept of type already. So it means that the value that is going to be returned must be of the type integer. So every function will have a return type, and similarly even variables will have types. Now what are variables? We will of course study about them in detail, but just remember for now that variables are something that are used for storing values. So even for variables we have to mention or specify what type of variable they are. Like for example, if it is an integer, then it means that it can hold integer values. And there is another type called character, which is denoted by char. So that specifies that variable is of character type. So we will study about all those things in detail as we move ahead. So just remember that types are a very important concept. So we'll take an example. When the type of a variable named v is t, we often say that v has type t, or interchangeably that v is a t. So let's say that we have a variable and the variable name is v and the type of that variable is t. So in saying, we say that v has type t, or we can also say v is a t. So here let's take an example. I am declaring a variable here called my variable and it is of the type integer. So int space name of the variable. So you can give any name to a variable, of course following the naming conventions. So here in this example, my variable is of type integer. So we can say that my variable has type integer, or we can just say that my variable is an integer. So that is the concept of type, and that is how you will specify and say about the types in C++ programming. Alright, so we have seen what are the basic things that are there in writing a C++ program, and we studied about the two important things, that is functions, and within that we saw the main function, which is the most important one, and then we also studied about types. Then we also saw an example of a complete C++ program. Alright, so with this lecture, I hope you have understood, at least in basic terms, how to write a C++ program. So in the next lecture, I will show you how to install the compiler and the source editor that you need for writing the C++ programs in your system, so that you can follow with me whenever we are writing any programs in this course, and you can also practice for yourself and learn along. So I hope this lecture about writing a simple C++ program is clear to you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. In this lecture, we are going to study about installing source code editor and compiler. So in the previous lecture, we saw how we can write a simple C++ program. Now it is time for us to install the source code editor and compiler, that is the tools that we require for actually writing the program and compiling and running them in our system, so that you can practice along when you follow this course. Okay, so we will see how the installation can be done and to verify if everything has been done correctly. Alright, so let's get started. So let's discuss about the tools that are required in order to completely write, compile and run a program. So the tools required for writing, compiling and running C++ programs. First of all, we need a source code editor. Now what is the use of this? This is for writing the program in an efficient way. So for source code editor, you can use any simple thing like Notepad or Notepad++, but I would recommend using Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is a source code editor which is really powerful, and also it supports the C++ extension, so it will help us in writing our code in a proper way. So we are going to use the Visual Studio Code for this. So again, you can get the complete Visual Studio path with min gw64/bin appended to the system path. Now I will show you how to do this. So in order to open a new command prompt in Windows, or you can open a new terminal in Visual Studio, we are trying to verify here. So we just have to do these steps and we'll be able to find out if it has. In this lecture, we are going to study about compiling and executing our programs using Windows command prompt or Windows CMD. So far we have seen the basic introduction to C programming. We have also seen how to write a simple C program, and we have also seen how to install the source code editor and the compiler for writing our program and for compiling and running our programs. So here I am going to show you how to actually compile and execute programs using Windows command prompt. So make sure that you have followed the previous lecture where we installed all the tools that are required for compiling and running our programs. So if you don't have the compiler installed, then what we are going to discuss in this lecture is not going to work in your system. So because of that, make sure that you have watched the previous video and make sure that you have installed all the necessary things that are required. Alright, so let's get started. So first of all, let's understand what is the meaning of compiling, and then we will see how to actually compile and run a program. So having written the program, we need to compile it. So we have to compile a program after writing it. Compiling is a transformation from source code, which is the human readable form, to machine code, which is the computer executable code. So when we write a program, like we have seen in our previous lectures, we write it in human readable form, which is known as a source code. Now the computer has to convert it to machine code, only then it will be able to execute that code. So the conversion or the transformation of the source code from the human readable form into machine code or computer executable code is known as compiling. Okay, now how you compile a program depends on your operating system and the compiler. So the way of compiling a program will depend upon your operating system and also the compiler. So in this course we are using Windows, and then we are using the MinGW compiler, which we have seen in the previous lecture. So using that, I am going to show you how we can compile our programs. So we will see how to compile and execute our programs via the Windows command prompt. So if you remember, in the previous lecture we have also installed the Visual Studio Code, and even using that we can compile our programs. But here in this lecture we are going to discuss how to compile using Windows command prompt, and in the next lecture we will see how to do it from Visual Studio Code itself. Okay, so let's see the steps. So for compiling a program using Windows command prompt, first of all what we have to do is we have to create the source file. Now let's see how to create the source file and what are the steps involved in creating the source file. So source file is nothing but the file that contains our source code. So first of all, navigate to any location of your choice and create an empty text file. So you can go to any location in your computer and then you can create an empty text file. Now after that, rename the file's extension to .cpp. Now this is very important. We first created a text file, but we have to rename the extension of the file to .cpp, which will specify that this is a C.
Okay. Tingnan nyo nga yung ano niya. I think dito sa atin merong ano halimbawa, projects. Saan ba tayo nag-ano? Okay. Execute. Ayun. So, dito, sa DevC, ang ating command prompt para mag-compile at saka run, F11. Yung ano nga, tingnan nyo nga yung sa inyo. Sino yung may code block? Tingnan nyo nga kung ano yung command prompt ng ano. Dito sa akin kasi sa DevC ay para mag-execute F11. So, okay. I-ano ko nga, F11. So, gagamitin ko yung ano. F11. Ayan, okay. So, nag-ano siya, no? Nagra-run siya using okay. So, sa DevC yan. Tingnan ko nga yung iba dyan. Sige, tingnan natin kung sino yung naka-code block sa ano, sa inyo. Admit na. Na-admit na yan. Sino naka-code block? Tingnan ko nga. Puro kasi naka-devc yung nakikita ko dito. Or may gumagamit ba ng iba dyan? Tingnan lang natin kung ano yung ano. Paano yung iba. Okay. So, devc. Puro devc. Nako, puro devc. Paano kaya dun sa ano, sa mobile? Sa mobile, meron ba kayong ano? Hindi ano? Parang i-click talaga pagka ano. Kenneth, paano siya ano? Meron ba siyang command prompt? May shortcut ba siya? Para... Wala, ano? So, anong gagawin para
Wala po.
Anong usually ginagawa mo para makita yung ano? Yung... para pag ipinakita mo, pag ni-run mo na, anong ginagawa mo? Paano
Wait
nga
lang
pa-share
po.
nung screen mo para makita natin ulit? So yung DevC F11, which is na-try ko na. Para lang may idea tayo kung paano siya. Paano sa mobile. Ano yung pinapress mo lang siya?
Opo, ma'am. Pinipress lang po.
Pinapress lang ano?
Wait lang po, hanapin ko lang.
Walang shortcut, no? Tama?
Opo.
Okay, so sa ganun sa mobile, pinipress lang siya. Okay. So, alright. So, okay. So, puro naman kayo lahat DevC, pinakita ko na yung unless merong ibang gumagamit dyan. Ayan. So, dito sa para lang dun sa application ng ating pinanood, no? Baba ko nga ito. Dito ka. Baba. So, makikita nyo doon pag dun sa execute, ayan, katabi lang niya yung F11. So, siya yung parang shortcut or command. Hindi, shortcut to. Pag gagamit tayo, no? So, F11. Yung niya kasi, yung
Sa mobile po.
Oh. Yes.
Yung sa mobile po, ma'am, pipindutin nyo lang po yung yung parang play button.
Yung play button. So, yun yung
Opo, may ilalim.
niya, run, tsaka compile.
Opo.
Okay. So, dito kasi sa DevC, since mostly naka-DevC, pag nag-execute, F11 yung shortcut, no? Ayan, F11. Pag dito sa video natin, dun sa sinusundan natin na video, ang niya is, syempre, kailangan mo munang gumawa ng file para meron kang So, meron siyang, i-skip na natin to kasi hindi naman visual code ang ating ginagamit, no? Okay. So, lang yan, compiling and executing. So, depende yan sa gamit natin na compiler. Okay. So, moving on.
In the previous lecture, we have seen how to compile and execute programs using Windows command prompt. So in this lecture, we are going to study about how to compile and execute programs using the Visual Studio Code. So in
na natin yan.
Lazada 55 Super.
In this lecture, we are going to study about input and output in C++. So we will see how to take input and also give output in C++ program.
Okay, sandali lang. Alright, hindi na naman tayo stop presenting. And then share. Hindi ko na naman na-press yung sound. Okay, sorry naman. Okay, and ibaba natin ito.
In this
meron na? Meron na?
Yes po.
Okay, okay.
lecture, we are going to study about input and output in C++. So we will see how to take input and also give output in C++ programming language. Alright, so let's get started. So coming to input and output in C++, the C++ language does not define any statements to do input or output. So by default, C++ language does not define any statement for doing the input or output. Then how do we do input or output in C++? Instead, C++ includes an extensive standard library that provides input, output, and many other facilities. So though C++ language does not have or define any statements to do input and output, it is having something known as a standard library. Now what is a standard library? It is an extensive library that provides many facilities, and one of them is the input-output facility. So using the standard library from C++, we are going to do the input and output. So we will see how to do that. So for the purpose of input and output, we will make use of something known as the IOStream library. So IOStream stands for input output stream. And remember, this is a library that is a part of the standard library that we have in C++. So this is the one that will provide us with the facilities for doing input and output. So we will see how it is done. So coming to the IOStream library, the IOStream library is made up of two types. One is the iStream and other one is the OStream. So that is why IO. So what is the iStream? iStream is the input stream that is used for taking inputs. And OStream, it stands for output stream that is used for giving outputs. And now we understood I is input and O is output. Now what is this stream? What do we mean by stream? So stream is nothing but a sequence of characters read from or written to an input-output device. So any sequence of characters that we are writing to or reading from an input-output device is known as a stream. Now I hope you understood what is the meaning of input stream and output stream. So these two make up the IOStream library. Okay, so we have understood the IOStream library. Now how is actually input and output done? Let's see that. So the standard input and output objects is what will help us to actually do the input and output. So let's see what are they. So the IOStream library defines 4 input-output objects. Let's see what they are. Number 1, we have CIN, which is pronounced as CIN. So we call this as CIN, and this is used for standard input. So it stands for console input and we pronounce it as CIN, and this is the object that we are going to use for taking inputs. And then secondly we have COUT, which we pronounce as Cout, and it stands for console output, and this is the standard output object. So this object is what is going to help us for giving the outputs. Then we have CERR, pronounced as CER, which is the standard error object. Now this is used for standard errors. And then the last one is CLOG, which is pronounced as CLOG, and this is used for general information like log information and all. Okay, so the most important two things here are CIN and COUT. So the CIN, this is of the type iStream. So we said that iStream and OStream, they are types in the IOStream library. So we have discussed about what is types already in one of the previous lectures. So the CIN is actually an object of the iStream type. So that's what you have to remember. And then COUT, CER and CLOG, they are all of the type OStream. So again, OStream is the type that is there in the IOStream library, and then the COUT, CER and CLOG, they are objects of the type OStream. So these are the main objects that we need to keep in mind: CIN, COUT, CER and CLOG. And CIN and COUT are the most important ones and the most common ones that we are going to extensively use in this course as well. So let's take an example program making use of this CIN and COUT in order to see how they work and how their syntax looks like and how we have to write it in a C++ code. So coming to this example, here we have written a complete code, a complete program, and here we see that the first line is include IOStream. So here we see that the first line is include IOStream, then int main, then we see here std, and then we see that we have 2 colons, and then it's written here cout, and we have 2 angle brackets, and within quotes it is written enter 2 numbers, and we close the quotes, and here again we have these 2 angle brackets, and it's written here std and colon end l, and then semicolon. And here we have int n1 equal to 0, n2 equal to 0, then std cin n1, n2, and then std cout, the sum of n1 and n2 is n1 plus n2, std nline again and return 0. So let us see what are the meanings of all these things written in this program. So let's start from the top itself. So here it is written hash include, and within angle brackets it is written IOStream. So what is this? This is the header. In every C++ program we will be mentioning the header. So IOStream is the header that we are going to make use here, and IOStream is the one that contains the library that enables the cout and CIN and all those objects. So that is why we have to include this IOStream library. So I'm telling my compiler that include this IOStream header in my program. Then here we have int main. So what is this? This is the main function. So we have already discussed about main function. So every C++ program will be having a main function. So here we have a main function and the return type is int. So we have also seen about this in the previous lectures. Okay, then next here we see within this curly braces the body of that function is there. The function body is over here. So this is what is actually going to perform the operation, whatever is going to be done. So let's see. So here we have std cout. So what is this? This is the standard output object. So we already studied that cout is the standard output object. Now why am I writing std cout? Now std is the standard library. So as we already said in the beginning of this lecture, C++ does not define any statements for doing input or output, but it includes an extensive library that is a standard library. So this cout is actually present within the standard library. So we are telling that use the cout that is present in the standard library, and this colon that we see here, this is known as the scope operator. So we are telling that use the cout that is within the scope of the standard library. So this cout is going to print something on the screen. Now here we see these two angle brackets that are opening to the right. So this is the output operator. So after cout you have to write this output operator, and after that only you have to mention what you have to print. Okay. Now here it is written enter two numbers. So this is the string literal. That means the actual thing that we are going to print on the screen, and it has to be written within this double quotes. So whatever is written within this double quotes in a cout statement will be printed on the screen as it is. So this is the string literal that will be printed. And here we see again we have this output operator, and it is written here std end l. Now what is this? This is actually a manipulator. Now what do we mean by manipulator? So we see that this is a string and it is just manipulating the stream. So we are actually trying to print something as a stream on the screen, and this manipulator ENDL stands for end line. So it is manipulating the stream and it is taking the control to the next line. So if you write ENDL, then it will break from this line and come to the next line on the screen. So that is what we mean by ENDL. And again we see that std is written here. Why? Because this ENDL is also defined inside the std library or the standard library. So we are saying that use the end line that is within the scope of the standard library. And why are we using this output operator again? Because we see that the type of data has changed. Till here we were just printing something that we wanted to print on the screen, and we have closed the double quotes, and here what we are trying to put inside this cout is an end line which is not a string but it is a manipulator. So whenever the type changes we have to use this output operator again. So that is why this output operator is used again, and then we end the statement with a semicolon. So this entire cout statement, it starts from here and it ends at this semicolon. Okay, so that is the entire cout statement. So what it is essentially going to do, it is going to print on the screen, enter two numbers, and then it is going to take the control to the next line. Okay, now after this we have int n1 equal to 0, n2 equal to 0. Now what are these? These are variable declarations. Now variables are something that we are going to learn in detail in the coming lectures, but just remember for now that variable is something that can store values, and then we are declaring two variables n1 and n2, and they are of the type integer. So they are integer variables, and initially they are holding the values 0 0. Okay, so int n1 equal to 0 comma, and n2 is also equal to 0. So this comma is telling that this n2 is also an integer and it is equal to 0, and then we end it with a semicolon. Okay, so that is a variable declaration. And then next we have this stdcin, and then we have these two angle brackets that are opening to the left, and then we take n1, and again we have these two angle brackets opening to the left, and then n2. Now what do we mean by this? Now stdcin is the standard input object. So we have already seen that in the previous slide. So we want to take input from the user. So we ask the user here to enter two numbers, and when the user is going to enter those two numbers, we have to store it somewhere. So that will be stored in this n1 and n2. So we are making use of the cin object, and again this cin is within the standard library scope. So that is why we are writing std and this scope operator. And then we have this angle brackets here, which is the input operator. So this is the output operator which will be used in cout, and this is the input operator which we use with cin. So there are two input operators here. So one is for this n1 and another one is for n2. Now what it essentially does still here we ask the user to enter two numbers, and we came to the next line, and then we declared two variables n1 and n2, and then when the user will enter two values from the keyboard, it will be captured by using the cin, and the first value that the user enters will be stored in n1, and after pressing space or enter when he enters the second number, that will be stored inside the variable n2. So that is what it does. Okay. Now we have here a big cout statement, that is std cout, and then it says the sum of n1 and n2 is n1 plus n2, and again end line, and then return 0. So return 0 is nothing but the return statement. Okay, so let's take a look at this cout statement here. So we want to actually print that the sum of and the two numbers that the user has entered is, and then we want to print the actual sum. So that's what we are trying to do here. So cout and then output operator, and I want to print this string on the screen, the sum of. So that is why I put it within double quotes. Now I want to print the first number that the user has entered. Now here we see that it is going to print a variable and not a string. So because of that, I have to use this output operator again. So I put this output operator and then I will print n1. What is n1? n1 will store the value that the user has entered, and that will be printed on the screen. Okay, and after this I want to print the word and, A-N-D, and. Now when I print and, we see that and is a string and here it was a variable, so there is a change. Because of that I have to use the output operator again, and then within double quotes I write and. So whenever you want to print strings as it is, you have to use double quotes. But for variables we see that we don't have to use the double quotes. Okay, so I print and, then I want to print the second number that the user has entered. So again we see we are going to print a variable, so we have to use the output operator again, and I print n2, and then I want to print the word is, is. So this is again a string which is again different from this variable here. So I use the output operator here again and I print is. So that is why it is put under double quotes, and then now I want to print the actual sum. So I open the output operator here again and n1 plus n2. So what will this do? This will actually add n1 and n2, and that sum will be printed there. And again this is the sum of two variables, so we don't have to put it under double quotes. Okay, now that much will be printed, and again I want to take the control to the next line. Because of that I open the output operator here again and std end line. So
okay, pwede bang i-code natin para matest na natin? Okay, gusto kong makita yung pag-encode ng input, no, dun sa N1 at saka N2. Ayan. Wala ako nito, hindi ko to na-code. Meron ba dito? Kaya tingnan ko nga kung meron siyang Okay, alright. Maiksi lang naman. Okay, so i-code natin to sa devc. Sinong mabilis mag-type? Sino na nagta-type? Yan na una. Teka. Close ko to. Bilis. Ayan. Asterisk. Siyempre, mabagal daw ako mag-type. Include. IO stream. Yung may nga nakatapos na, mag-react ha. Magsalita. Para makita natin yung okay. And then open curly brace, and then std cout, and then enter two numbers, and then yung function. Okay. Space std ENDL. ENDL means end line. Ayan. Okay, so dyan na mag-i-stop yung ano na yan, yung statement na yan. And then, INP, and 1 is equal to 0, and then syempre hindi ko nakikita, pas natin, okay, comma, and 2 is equal to 0 ulit, and then ayan. Okay, so natapos na yun. Doon tayo sa next STD. Ayan. Scene. Okay, that's standard input. And then, dahil input ito, you will use greater than, and then N1, and then another function na input, and 2, and then ayan, okay, and then STD cout. This, what we're doing is input-output, no? Cout, tapos, close in, the sum of, and then, mag-aano tayo ng output function, space N1, and then another output, napunta doon. Yung N na text, kailangan daw naka-enclose sa quotation, and tapos output space N2. Sana M2, tapos shift space again, another output, yung is, is sa loob ng quotation mark kasi text siya, and then another out, which is yung sum ng N1 at saka N2, plus N2, and then function ulit na out, which is para sa ating ending ng line, which is E and L, and the line, and then asterisk, and then return 0, 0, teka, meron ba akong open curly brace sa taas? Ayan, okay, and then ang ating ending ay close curly brace. Ayan. Ayan. Okay. So, ilagay natin ito. Tingnan ko nga kung may nauna sa akin. Ayan, may nag-react na doon. Sa chat. Ito yung huli. Ayun. So, may nauna na sa akin. Okay. Ilaload ko lang to sa sa ating control A. DevC. Okay. So, kailangan ko ng bago. Source. Control D. At ating i-run. Okay. Input. Output. Okay. Save. Okay. Test natin. Mag-i-input tayo. Enter 2 numbers. Okay. 7. And ano ba? Pwede bang mag-i-space ba ako? O, sige. Space. 8. And then enter. The sum of 7 and 8 is 15. Ayun. Nag-add siya. Ayan. So, na-test ko na siya. Sige nga. Okay. Try tayo dun sa ating So, ununahan na natin yung video. Kay nino nga tayo natapos? Kay Joy, no? Kay Joy Balansag. So, okay. Ito si Joy. Ito ba yung dulo? O si Joy nakakapaggawa na? Hindi. Okay. Yung last read natin. Ayan. 5:30. Si Winmark. 5:30. Winmark, ikaw ba yung una? Ito na ba yung last?
Opo.
Okay.
Opo, ma'am.
Okay. So, alam nyo naman yung ating style. Pagka sino yung nauna, yung ginagawa natin. Meron tayong 10 points. Ayan. Sige. Okay, Winmark. Sige. Pa-share. Okay. At ika mag-a-unshare muna ako. Ayan. Naka-unshare na ako. So, na-try ko na siya. Nakita nyo na rin na trinay ko. Ayan. So, nag-see out siya. Okay. Enter 2 numbers. 20. 13. Okay. So, meron kang, hiniwa-hiwalay mo, So, pinosisyon mo yung end dun sa ayun. Kaya nagkaganyan. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Okay, thank you. Salamat, Winmark. Okay, next si Carlo. John Carlo. Ayan. Okay, so tinuloy niya yung Hindi mo natanggal yung diniretso mo. O, sige. Ayan. May pangalan. O, sige. Okay. Okay. Ayun. Ayan. Okay. So, gusto niya talaga may pangalan. Good job. Ayan. Okay. Akala ko hindi natanggal kanina. Alright. Si, naman, si Justin May. Teka, tingnan natin yung yung code mo. Para so nilagyan mo ng space para medyo malayo-layo. Okay. Okay. Right. Salamat. Salamat, Justin. Next, si Joy. Ayan, si Joy. Joy Balansag. Ayan. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joy. O, Paula. Next ka na. Si Paula. Okay. Pinakita na rin ni Paula yung groupings. Hindi pa tapos yun, Paula, no?
Tapos na po.
Tapos na. O, sige. Pagkatapos niyan, i-share mo yung groupings natin. Sige. Enter numbers. Ayun. Okay. Thank you. Sige. Alright. Paula. Teka, Paula, share mo muna yung groupings para ano. Alam na ng mga kaklase mo kung sino yung kasama nila. Ayan. So, guys, ito na yung ating grouping. We have 6 groups. 7 each. Ayan. So, hindi pa lang yan nalalagyan ng ano, ng color coding. Ayan. So, may mga role uli yung ating mga members. Okay. Pero, ano ha, class, it doesn't restrict you kung ano, kung pwede kayong tumulong as a developer, walang problema. Pati rin dun sa ano, dun sa role ng kaklase nyo, kung meron kayong may i-contribute aside from role na naka-assign sa inyo. Ano? It should not restrict you. Okay. Salamat, Paula. So, ayan yung ating groupings. Pwedeng pa-share mo na lang sa akin, no? Ayan, para mamaya.
Ito, ma'am.
Okay. Sige. Salamat, Paula. So, go. Go naman si next, si Benji. So, ang gagawin ni Benji ay isi-share niya yung kanyang camera. Tama ba, Benji?
Hindi po. I-ano ko na po. Share screen.
Share screen. Okay.
Try ko lang po. Kita po, ma'am.
Ayan, kita na. Pwede naman pala, Benji.
Kasi po, ma'am, sa Gmeet, ma'am, di ko po kasi
magawa.
Malakin po yung Gmail ko po, ma'am, kaya di po ako makapasok sa Gmail.
Okay. Pero dito sa ano, okay na?
Okay naman po sa MS Team.
Okay, good. Ayan. So, paano nga pa? Ay, nagawa mo na, no? Ulit nga. Medyo na, ano tayo, nawala sa isip ko. Sige.
Eto.
So, para mag-load ka ng number. Run. Ayan. Okay. So, 34. And then, ayun. Okay. Thank you. Salamat, Benji. Next, si Russell. Try mo nga ano, F11. Close mo muna dyan. Para ano, paano ba ano, kiniklik mo lang or nag-ano ka. Try mo yung F11. Kasi naka-devc ka rin. Ayun. Okay, so enter numbers. Okay. Salamat. Sana ano, mali yung ano ko, dapat aside from sum, ginawa rin natin yung ano, yung 4. Pero anyway, gagawin na lang natin yun dun sa arithmetic. Input-output pa lang naman tayo. Okay. Next. Okay, next. Si Jerome. Ayun, 30. Okay. Right. Thank you, Jerome. Next, si Macol. Ayun, okay. Thank you, Macol. Tingnan ko lang kung naandito si Josiah. Ay, andyan na si Josiah. So, mamaya pag umabot na si Josiah, sana okay na, ano. Ayan. Okay. Francel, next. Ayan. Input numbers. Ayun. Okay. Alright. Salamat, Francel. Okay, next, si Maria Cristina Provido. Okay. Ayan, nilagyan niya rin ng pangalan. Okay, pakiran. Okay. Embarcadero del Sea. Okay. Ayun. Okay. Thank you, Christina. Next, si Kristen Joy. Okay, enter. Ayun. Okay, 30. Alright. Thank you. Arnold. Arnold ba yung may-ari ng PC, Christine? Nakalagay Arnold eh. Okay. Next, si Jessica Berdida. Okay. Ano nangyari? Ba't sinarduhan mo? Bakit bigla yung ulo ko? Mainit. Ayun. Naka-online siya. Sige. Run. Ayun sa baba. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Next, si Joanna Patricia. Ayan, ganda pagka ganito sunod-sunod eh. Okay. Okay. Ayun. Alright, tama siya. Thank you. Next, si Kim. Kim Shalom. Haba ng waiting period nitong Debsi mo. Okay lang, sige. Tapos sasabihin niya pagka nag-encode ka so and so second. Ano nangyari? Wala pa rin. Ang tagal ah. Close mo nga.
Restart ko po muna.
Close mo nga uli. Sige. Baka lang yan, naglalag lang. O, sige, try mo uli. Yan. Ayun, lumitaw din. Ayan. Okay, tama na. Salamat. Salamat, Kim. Okay, next, si Casey. Casey Nabal. To be followed by China May. Ayan, naka-online din siya. Ay, yung mga naka-online ha, sa susunod ha. Sige, pakiran. Okay, enter 2 numbers. Ayun. Okay, thank you. China. China May. Okay.
Okay na po, ma'am.
Ayan, okay. Salamat, China. Okay, next, si Kyla. Si Michelle Kyla Lopez. To be followed by Borigas Joanna. Magkasunod palagi itong dalawang Joanna na to eh. Okay, ito yung kay Kyla. Ayan. Okay. Takiran. Okay, enter. Ayun, 24. Okay. Thank you. 3.8 seconds. Ayan. Oh. Sino next? Si Borigas. Tapos susundan ni Joanna Villegas. Ayun, 48. Okay. Thank you. Oh, next. Sino nga yun? Ayan. Si Villegas. Okay. Enter. Okay. Laki ng number niyan. Okay, thank you. Alright, next. Si Alex. Alexandra. Kit naman. Susundan ni Josiah. So, makikita natin kung maayos na yung ano ni Josiah. Alright. Thank you, Alex. Next, si Josiah. Tingnan natin kung okay na to. Hopefully, okay na. Para mabilis tayo, sunod-sunod.
Ayaw pa din po, ma'am. Pasensya na po.
Bakit? Ano ba nangyayari dyan sa'yo? Admit natin.
Kung ano pag pinagtitingin ko po dito.
Kung ano mga pinagtitindot mo. Sige. Okay. Pero nakagawa ka na.
Yes po.
Pwede mo bang bigyan kami ng screenshot para mamaya pakita ko na lang?
Opo. Teka lang po.
Para sayang naman yung nagawa mo kung hindi natin makikita. Okay. Next, si Jules. Sinend mo sa akin ni Paula yung grouping. Salamat, Paula. Ako na sa kabilang screen. Ayan. Another number. Ayun. Ayan. Okay. Thank you, Eliza. Hindi. Eliza Andata. Si Jules. Sino si Eliza? Jules. Sino si Eliza, Jules? Ano yon, ate mo?
Ma'am, kapatid ko po.
Okay, kapatid mo nga. Okay. Salamat, Jules. Next, si John James Bermeo. Susundan ni Cereline. Para mabilis tayo. John James. Okay. Sige. Okay. And enter number. Okay. 40. Okay, thanks. Salamat. Okay, Cereline, next. Salamat, John James. So, yung ating I hope na intindihan niyo yung concept ng no? See in at saka see out. Ayan. Yung input-output natin. Serilyn. Okay, medyo naglalag pa tong kay Serilyn. Aha. Okay, medyo mahaba-haba ang lag mo, Serilyn. Ayan, okay, lumitaw na. Okay, sige. Right, ayun, 15. At meron pa siyang process exhibit. May ganung ano, no? Okay. Thank you, Serilyn. Next, si Chester. Chester, and then to be followed by Edson. Okay. Okay, ano, ayan. Right, input. Okay. Nilagyan niya ng ano, ng text para magkahiwalay sila talaga. Okay. Good. Alright, next. Si Edson. Pagkatapos ni Edson, si Kiana. Nag-ready na. Okay, thank you. Okay, next, si Kiana. Okay. Okay, salamat, Kiana. Okay, susundan ka ni Juan Miguel. Tapos si Gilwin after Juan Miguel. Oh, admit natin. Ba't tinglang nawata? Ay, admitting. Nag-out ako ng ano. Out ko to ulit. Okay. So, si Juan Miguel. Kaka-admit ko lang.
Ma'am, mahina po.
Mahina ang ano, ang internet.
Oo, ma'am. Nawawala.
Nawawala ka? Sige, try mo ulit.
Ma'am, mag-share po.
Oo. Ayan. Naka-share ka na. Okay. Sige. Enter. Okay. Try. Alright. Thank you. Ayan. Next, si Gilwin. Magkatapos ni Gilwin, si Jigs. Salamat. Salamat, Gilwin. Next, si Jigs. Okay. Okay. Sige. Yung, ayan. Okay. Pakiran. Alright. Okay. Salamat. 5.47 seconds. Medyo mabagal yung ano, yung Bebsi mo. Ayan. Next, si Ashley. Ashley, and will be followed by Rainiel. Okay. Jigs, unshare ka na. Ayan. Okay. So, ito ay si Ashley. Naka-mobile siya. Ayun na. Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. Next, si Rainiel. Diba? Okay. Enter. Okay. And then, ayan. Tama. 46. Okay. Next, si Kent. Salamat, Rainiel. Pagkatapos ni Kent, si John, Kenneth. Okay. So, naka-mobile si Kent. Oh, punta ka na sa ano? Sa compiler mo. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Input. And then, ayun. Ang liit ah. Pwedeng lakihan ng konti yung output mo. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay, salamat. Naputol tun si Josiah. Okay. Kenneth. Alright. Okay. Thank you. Alright. Salamat. Next, si Jan Angelo Basco. Admit natin itong si Gruta. Okay. Sige. Pakiran. Ayan. Medyo natatrap ka sa presenting. Ayan. Yan din yung problema ko pag ano. Ayan. Okay. Enter. Enter number. Ayan. 17. Salamat. Okay. Next. Si Beatrice. Serene. Ayan, 27 ang total. Okay, thank you, Beatrice. Ito yung kay Josiah. Tingnan nga natin. Okay. Tapos, ito yung kanyang out. Okay. Alright. Okay, Kalin. Okay, enter. Ayan. Okay. Salamat, Kalin. Meron ba akong hindi natawag? Parang meron akong hindi natawag. Okay. Parang kasi medyo naaalala ko yung hindi ko mga natawag. Pwede bang yung mga hindi natawag ay ako lang magbe-base lang ako sa memory ko ha. Titingnan natin yung listahan. So, ayan, kompleto na tayo, 42. So, ibig sabihin na andito si Tayone. Tayone, magparamdam ka nga. Nag-42 na tayo. So, more. Tama ba? Nandiyan na si Tayone. Nagpakita na. Okay. Si Luis, meron ka na bang nagawa? Tama. Hindi ko pa natawag si Luis, ano? Teka.
Ma'am,
Oh.
error po nalabas sa akin.
Error. Pwede bang i-share mo yung screen mo para makita natin kung bakit nag-error? Ayan. 'Di ba? Ang tagal na nating walang troubleshooting. Ayan, meron tayong magagawa. Titingnan natin ngayon, no? So maganda ring makita natin kung anong problema nung Kayano. Kung bakit ba siya nag-error. Si Josiah, ang problema niya ay yung kanyang browser. At tingnan natin yung kay Luis kung anong problema, bakit nag-error. Sige, share mo para makita natin. Maganda yan para meron tayong experience ng troubleshooting.
Wait lang po, ma'am.
Sige. Okay. Tutulungan ka ng buong klase. Ayan. Ano lang yan, it's a matter of looking at your code. Baka meron ka lang kulang. Ang tawag doon sa gagawin natin ay debugging. Ayan. Pag nag-debug, titingnan mo kung ano yung problema. Guys, pag nakaka-experience kayo ng ganyan, i-share nyo. Kasi hindi lang kayo ang matututo, pati yung mga kaklase ninyo, no? Huwag nyong ikakahiya kung may error. Okay? Yan ang
Ma'am,
kasama
okay
sa
na po
experience.
pala.
Okay na. So, anong problema? Bakit ka nag-error? Share mo naman. Again, huwag kayong mahihiya pagka may issue yung nyo, no? Kailangan sabihin nyo para natutulungan natin ang bawat isa. It's a matter of sharing our experiences. Diyan tayo natututo, no? Sige. Share mo na kung tapos na siya para malaman din natin kung ano yung naging issue mo.
Mali lang po pala yung nalagay ko po dun sa end.
Okay. Sige, share mo na para makita natin.
Kita po, ma'am.
Hintayin lang natin. Ayan. So, naka-mobile ka rin. Okay. Sige. Okay. And then, ayun. Balikan natin yung code mo. So, anong naging problema? Ano yung naging dito sa Ano yung kulang mo? Sige, pakita mo yung code para matututo tayo sa experience mo. Ayan. So, anong kulang mo dyan? Type mo na lang kung hindi ka pwedeng magsalita. Doon sa code. Ayan. Ayan. So, tinanggal niya na. So, anong naging ano doon? Pwede ka nang hindi na nakashare. Sa mobile, hindi pwedeng sabay, Kailangan either ipakita mo yung sinishare mo, tapos saka ka magsasalita. Tama ba? Tama ba yung mga naka-mobile? Ganun ba yung sitwasyon nyo? Hindi pwedeng magsabay ng
Pwede po yung...
Pwede
po mo.
Pwede
po.
Pwede naman pala. O, sige. So, Luis, ano nga uli yung nangyari dun sa sa code mo? Ano yung kulang? Pinakita mo na sa amin. Meron ka bang kulang or meron kang nailagay na hindi Ano nangyari na kay Luis? Hinahanap ko si 42 kayo. Hinahanap lang ako sa listahan. Sige, habang tinatry ma-decipher ni Luis yung kanyang Julius, Andaya, Ken, Shalom, Groot, Russell, Markery. Okay. Okay. Sige na nga. Nasabi na naman niya kanina. Okay, so yun yung input-output class. Alright, so balik tayo dun sa ating Okay, i-share ko lang ulit para maituloy natin yung ating para marami tayong matatapos. Ayan. So ito yung na-share ko na to kanina. Balikan lang natin si Kuya. Ayan. So
this will take the control to the next line, and then we close the cout statement with a semicolon. So essentially what it is going to do, if the user has suppose let's say entered values 2 and 3, it will print the sum of 2 and 3 is, what is 2 plus 3? 5. Okay, is 5. So that is what will be printed, and then we return 0. So this is the return statement, and I already explained in one of the previous lectures why we need this return statement, because this main function over here has a return type integer. So we have to return an integer values. So it does not have anything to do with what we are trying to do here, but we have to anyway mandatorily return a value. So that's why we are just returning 0, which is an integer. Okay, so I hope with that you understood the meaning of this program. Okay, so let's take this program and run it using Visual Studio Code, and let's see the output, how it looks like. So here I have my VS Code open. So I'll go to File and open a folder which I have created in my drive called CPP files. You can create one if you don't have, and then select the folder, and I have the CPP files over here, and I'm going to create a new file here, and let's give it some name. Let's call it sum.cpp. Okay, so I press enter, and then we will get this sum.cpp open in our editor here. So here we have to just type the code that we need. So I have copied the code that we just discussed. So let me just paste it here, and I have to save this file. So let me press Ctrl S on my keyboard, and it is saved, and now we have to run this program. So for compiling and running this program, I will use the second method that we have discussed in the previous lecture, where we studied about how to compile and run the programs using Visual Studio Code. So I'll go to terminal, and I will open a new terminal. Here the new terminal window is loading, and then here the path is correct. It is the CPP files. This is the folder where I have my sum.cpp. So I have to compile the program now. So for compiling, I have to type G++ space and the name of my file, which is sum.cpp. Okay, so I type sum.cpp and I press enter, and we see that there are no errors, and the output file got generated, which is named as a.exe, which is the default name of the output file. Now I have to run this output file. So for running the output file, I have to type ./a.exe. Now when I press enter, the program will run. And here it is asking me for 2 numbers. So we see that the cout statement got executed, enter 2 numbers. And then this end line statement has taken the control to the next line here. So if you did not give this, then this cursor kind of thing would have been there over here. But since we gave this end line, it came to the new line on the next line. So it is waiting for me to enter 2 numbers. So let's enter 2 numbers, let's say 3 and 7. So you can either give 3 space 7 or 3 enter and then 7. Okay, so I have entered 2 numbers and I will press enter. So when I press enter, what it is going to do is it is going to accept these 2 integers that I have entered, 3 and 7, and it will store them to n1 and n2. Now I press enter and then it says the sum of 3 and 7 is 10. So what happened is it printed this, the sum of is printed till here. And after that it prints n1. So what is n1? The first value I entered was 3, which was stored in n1. So n1 is 3, so 3 is printed. And then it prints the word and. So and is printed here. And then the next number I entered was 7. So 7 is stored in n2. So it is printing n2 here, so 7 is printed, and then it prints the word is. So is printed here, and then it prints the sum of n1 and n2. So n1 plus n2, that means 3 plus 7, which is equal to 10. So 10 is printed, and then we just send the control to the next line. So this is how we can make use of the in and cout, which are the standard input and output objects that are used for handling input and output in C++. Okay, so I hope you understood this simple program and how the cout and in objects work for handling input and output in C++. So remember, cout is for console output, which is for output.
Okay, so class, meron ba kayong naririnig? Or tama ba? May naririnig ba kayo? Doon sa video?
Meron.
Meron. So,
yes po, ma'am.
Ha? Okay?
Meron.
Okay. So, dito sa, sa gamit niya, dun sa kanyang input-output, kasi nga naka-command, command run, naka-PowerShell, no? So, kaya, bawat niya is, actually, maganda rin naman yung naka-command, kaso hindi naman yan ang gamit natin na compiler. So, kasi naka-BS code siya. So, dun sa, naka-compile, naka-command, siya, naka-command setting, tapos nagpa-PowerShell. So, maganda ring practice yon, lalo na kung sa database, kung naka-PowerShell ka. Ayan. At least, may idea kayo dun sa ibang, compiler, kung paano yan. Okay. Kaanong oras nga tayo? 6:30, Tama ba? Okay, so pwede pa tayo ng isa pa. Okay. 6:30. Ayan, correct. Okay, so diretso lang natin si Kuya. Ayan.
In this lecture, we are going to study about namespaces. So in the previous lecture, we saw how input and output are implemented in C++ programming. And there we saw the syntax that we use for in and cout, that is for taking input and for giving out outputs. So keeping that syntax in mind, we are going to study about namespaces. So let us see what are these namespaces and what is it used for. So the first question that we have to answer is, what is actually a namespace? So let's see. A namespace is a declarative region that provides a scope to the identifiers inside it. Now what do we mean by this? So it is a declarative region. So it is a region and it will provide a scope to the identifiers that are inside that scope. Now what are the identifiers that we are talking about? So identifiers means they can be the names of types or functions or variables, etc. So for these kind of identifiers, the namespace is a declarative region and that region will provide the scope to that. So don't worry if this definition looks a little confusing, it will become clear as we move ahead. So they are used to organize code into logical groups and to prevent name collisions that can occur especially when the code base includes multiple libraries. So in the previous lecture, when we took the example of input and output, we saw that whenever we were trying to write an output on the screen, we used std and then we used the scope operator and then we wrote cout. and then we wrote what we wanted to print out on the screen. So we saw that it was written as std cout. Now what does that std mean? So by std we mean that cout is declared inside the standard library. So std stands for the standard library. So we are telling the compiler that use the cout that is defined inside that standard library. So there can be cases when we have multiple libraries in our code and there can be different type of couts. So let's say that there is another type of cout that is defined inside another library which performs in a little different way. But we want to use the cout that is from the standard library and that works in the way we want. That is for displaying the output on the screen. So we are just specifying which is the cout that we want to use. So namespace is the region that gives the scope to the identifier. So now I hope it has become a little clearer. Alright, so we were talking about the standard namespace or the std namespace. So let's talk a little more about that. So the standard namespace, which is written as std namespace. So let's take an example program. So here we have a program which is a complete program. So here we have the header and then we have the main function, and then here we see that we are just asking the user to enter any number. So we use standard cout. So std, this is the scope operator as I said, and cout, and then we are just declaring one variable, that is n1, and it is of the type integer and the initial value is equal to 0. Now whatever the user enters, we are accepting it or storing it in the variable n1. So we are using stdcin, and then we are just trying to output the value the user has entered. So again we use stdcout and we are saying that the entered number is n1. So this is just a simple program to take an input from the user and display what the user has entered. Okay, now here we notice that we are using std again. So we notice that we use stdcin and stdcout instead of simply writing cin or cout. Now why is that? The prefix std and the scope operator indicates that the names cout and cin are defined inside the namespace named std. So std is the namespace, or it is the library within which the cout and cin are defined. So we are telling the compiler that I want to use the cout and cin that is defined inside the standard library or this std namespace. So that is what we mean by namespace. Now I hope you got an idea of why this is called the scope operator, because this cout is defined within the scope of the standard library. So we are saying that use a cout within the scope of this standard library or the standard namespace. So that is what we mean here. Now the problem with this is that whenever we are writing cout or cin, or whenever we want to use something from this standard namespace, we have to explicitly mention it like this by using this std and this scope operator. We cannot simply write cout or cin. So that is a problem that we face. So in order to avoid that, we will see what are the solutions that we can have. So for that, we are going to discuss about namespace using declarations. So let's see what do we mean by this. A using declaration lets us use a name from a namespace without qualifying the name with a namespace name : prefix. Now we are going to make use of something called the using declaration. So this keyword is important, using. So by making use of this using declaration, we won't have to explicitly mention again the namespace before using that name that we want to use. So let's see some example. So here the syntax is using namespace and the scope operator and name. So let's see an example to understand this. So here we take an example again. So this is the same program that we saw in the previous slide. So we are asking the user to enter any number and we store it into n1 and we just display it out again. Okay, so here we see that we are using just cout. We are not using stdcout. Why? Because we have mentioned it in the beginning of the program itself that we are using the cout from the standard library or the standard namespace. So I mention it beforehand. And how do I do it? By making use of the using, using keyword. So I say that we are using the cout from the standard namespace. So if I do this, I don't have to type std again before this cout. So I can simply write cout and the compiler knows that we are using the cout from the std namespace. Okay, so let us try to run this program using VS Code and see what will be the output. Okay, so here I have copied that same program here. So we are using std cout here, and then I'm just writing cout. So let's see if this program will compile correctly or if it will throw any error. So I'll go to the terminal, I'll open a new terminal, and the name of my file is ns.cpp. Okay, so let me compile this program by typing g++ space ns.cpp. Okay, so it has compiled successfully and the output file is a.exe. So let's try to run it and see. So /a.exe, and then okay, so it is running successfully. So it asked me to enter any number. Let me enter 3. Enter. So the entered number is 3. So this program is working correctly. So even though we did not write std cout here, just by writing cout also it works, because I already mentioned that we are using the cout from the standard namespace. Okay, now let's try to remove this std from the cin and see what will happen. Now I have written cout here and now I am writing cin here. Okay, so let's save it and let us run this program. So I come back to the terminal here and I will type g++ ns.cpp and I press enter. And here we see that it is throwing an error. So it is saying that cin was not declared in this scope. So we are saying cin, but it does not know where is cin. So we have to say that cin is from which library or from which namespace. I can either write std cin as it was written before, or I can write using std cin just like we wrote for cout here. So let me do that. Okay, I write using std cin now. So we are telling the compiler that whenever I use cin in this program, it is from this std namespace. Now let's compile this program again and see if it will work. So let me just clear the terminal. There is a command called clear in order to clear up the terminal window. So let me run the program again, g++ ns.cpp, and it compiled successfully. Now there are no errors, and let me run the output file and we see that it is compiling successfully. So we see that if we mention which namespace we are using from the beginning of the program itself, then we don't have to specify the namespace again and again while writing the program. Okay, so that is about the using declaration. Okay, so this was our example. Now let's take another example here. So here we see that we are making use of the end line as well. So here end line also is there, and we have seen that when we usually write end line, we write std and scope operator and end line. But here I am specifying that I am using the end line from the std namespace. So I have specified all the namespaces for cout, cin and end line. So because of that, when I write this program, I don't have to explicitly mention the namespaces again. So I don't need to write std here, here, nor here. So this program is also correct and it will compile correctly. Okay, so one more problem that we can face here is that we have to specify for each and every name that we use which is a namespace. So cout, cin and end line is written. Now if there are other things that you want to use, you have to again mention them. So in order to solve that problem, we can use something known as the using namespace std. So here what we are doing is that we are going to write this using namespace std. Now if we write this, what it means is that we are using the standard namespace, and whatever names are going to be used in this program, it is from the standard namespace. That is what it mentions. So I don't have to explicitly mention that I am using cout from std, then cin from std and end line from std. If I just write this single line, it just implies that whatever names I am using here are from the namespace std. So we can just write cout, end line and cin just like that without explicitly mentioning from which library or which namespace they belong. So that is about the using namespace std. But one problem that we can face here is that if we are making use of multiple libraries, that means like if we are going to use cout or cin, let's say from some other user defined libraries or some other libraries other than std, in those cases it can cause problems, because we mentioned here that it is going to make use of only the std namespace. So that could be a problem, but that is advanced level if you are making use of other libraries. But here in our course, we are going to mostly make use of the cout, cin and names from the standard library itself. So there won't be any problem if we use this as well. So anyway, let's go to VS Code and write this also in our code and see if it compiles successfully. Okay, so we come back to this same program, and now instead of writing all this using std, cout, cin and all, we will just write one line, that is using namespace std. Alright, and I save this program, and here I am just making use of cout, cin So here we are not having n line. So anyway, let's put one n line also over here. Now let's compile this program. So we see that there are no errors. It compiled successfully. And if we run it, we see that it is running successfully as well. Okay, so we said that we are using the namespace std. So it knows that cout, cin and nline, everything is from the standard namespace, and it just uses them directly and we don't have to explicitly mention them. Alright, so that is how we can make use of the using namespace std. So with that, I hope you understood what is the meaning of namespace and how namespaces are used to specify from which namespace or library we are making use of different names or objects. So with this, I hope the concept of namespace is clear to you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.
So that is namespace. Alright, so actually, yung namespace, yun naman talaga yung ginagamit. Lalo na pagka paulit-ulit, no? Hindi mo naman kailangan laging may standard na Yun talagang ginagamit sa Yun yung standard sa coding, no? Naka-namespace. Pagdating sa C++. So, dahil ang tag nun, yung ating teacher ay gusto niyang para maranasan natin yung no? Kasi yung latest na yung alam ko yung namespace lagi yung nagagamit eh. So, syempre hindi ako nagiging very So,
you see,
ano lang nangyari? Comments. Teka. Okay. So, 15 minutes. Sige, isa pa. Pwede pang comments. So, yun. Pagdating dun sa sa STD, in, out, para hindi na paulit-ulit, no? Shortcut, namespace. Ayan. Para nandun na lahat, no? Ayan. Okay. So, let's do the next one, which is yung comments.
In this lecture, we'll be studying about comments in C++ programming. So we will see what are comments, how to write comments, and what are the types of comments that are there in C++ programming. Okay, so let's get started. So coming to comments, comments are program text that is ignored by the compiler. That means whenever we are writing a program, we may want to write something which is apart from the source code, or we may want the compiler to ignore something. So those are known as comments. Now comments help the human readers of our programs. So if you're writing some complicated program, and let's say that there are some functions that you're writing, and you want some other people who are reading your code to understand what that function is doing. So you want to write a small description, or you want to write one line specifying what that function does. So in order to do that, you will write it within comments. And when you write it as a comment, it will not be treated as source code and the compiler will ignore that, but it will be helpful for the human readers. So they are typically used to summarize an algorithm, identify the purpose of a variable, or clarify an otherwise obscure segment of code. So like I said, it can be used for just clarifying or explaining what a specific piece of code or a variable or something else does. So the compiler ignores comments so that they have no effect on the program's behavior or performance. So this is what we just explained. It is not going to have any effect on the behavior or performance of the program because it is completely ignored by the compiler. So the question is, for whom are comments? We just said that compilers ignores the comments. Now who will make use of comments then? The readers of our code. So the readers of our code makes use of comments to understand the working of the code, like we just explained. So it is important to comment your code if you want to mention how that code is working and so on. So an incorrect comment is worse than no comment at all because it may mislead the reader. So you have to be very careful while writing comments, because if you write an incorrect comment, then that can mislead the reader. So an incorrect comment is always considered even worse than not writing any comment at all. So you should be careful. So when you change your code, be sure to update the comments too. So if you are changing your code and if it is not matching with the comments that you have written earlier, make sure that you change the comments too, so that a person who is reading your code again will not get confused, but he will always have access to the correct comments. So it is just a good practice to write good comments and make sure not to write wrong comments, because it is considered worse than even not writing any comments at all. Alright, so now we will see how to actually write the comments in C++. So coming to how to write the comments in C++, there are two types of comments in C++. One is a single line comment and the other one is known as a paired comment. So let's try to understand what are these and how they differ from each other, starting with the first one, that is single line comments. A single line comment starts with a double slash like this and ends with a new line. So everything to the right of the slashes on the current line is ignored by the compiler. So for writing single line comments, we just have to put a double slash like this, and whatever is written after this double slash till the end of that particular line will be ignored by the compiler, because that will be considered as a single line comment. So a comment of this kind can contain any text, including additional double slashes. So it can contain text, it can even contain other double slashes as well. So just remember that this is only for single lines. So if you want to comment two lines using single line comments, then you will have to put double slash on both the lines. So that is how multiple lines can be commented using these single line comments. So let's take an example. So here there is a program and here we are printing just one line. Let's learn single line comments. And here we see that there is a double slash and I have written a line here. This is a comment. It is ignored by the compiler. So the compiler is completely going to ignore this particular line that is written here, and it is not going to have any effect on the program. So let's just verify that by running this program in our Visual Studio Code. So here is that particular program that we just saw. So here we see that this is the comment, this is the line that is commented out, and let's see if the compiler is going to actually ignore this or not. So the name of my file is cs.cpp. So I'm going to the terminal, open a new terminal, and I'm going to compile this code. So I have to type g++ and name of the file, that is cs.cpp. Now enter. Okay, there are no errors. So let's run the output file. The output file is a.exe, that is a default output file that is created. So I have to type /a.exe, and here we see that the output is let's learn single line comments. So this is the one that is printed, and we see that this part is completely ignored by the compiler. So the compiler does not do anything with this part. Now if I remove this double slashes, what will happen? Let's see. So if I remove this double slash, then we see that this is just a single line and we have not written it within cout, nor is it written within any particular identifier. It is just a single line and this is not a valid C++ syntax. So it should throw an error. So let us save this program and run it again here. So we see that this was not declared in this scope. So it is just going to throw error because of this line. So the main purpose of this is to just show that this double slashes comments out that particular line and the compiler actually ignores it. Okay, so that is about the single line comments. Now let's go to the next one. So the next one is paired comments. So in paired comments, it uses two delimiters, which is a slash asterisk and asterisk slash. So these are the two delimiters that I use, and let's see how to use them. It begins with this and it ends with this. So it begins with a slash asterisk and it ends with the asterisk slash, and everything written between this will be commented out. So these comments can include anything that is not a asterisk slash, including new lines. The compiler treats everything that falls between this and this as part of the comment. So here we see that we can write even multiple lines of comments. So we just have to make sure that whatever we want to comment out are enclosed between this and this. So these are the delimiters that are used. So let's take an example here again. So here we see that we are writing a program where I am printing out let's learn paired comments, and then here I have the starting delimiter for our comment and I am writing a whole line here. This is a paired type comment, and I come to the next line and here I have written that everything between the delimiters are ignored, and here we have a cout statement here again saying this too. And then this is the ending delimiter. So we see that it started here and it ends here. So whatever is between these two delimiters will be commented and it will be ignored by the compiler. So let's put this program into VS Code and see if it actually works. So here I have that same program that we just saw. We have the starting delimiter here and the ending delimiter here. So according to what we have studied, everything between this and this should be commented out. So the only thing that should be printed by this program is let's learn paired comments. Okay, let's compile this program. Let's go to terminal and open a new terminal here, and then the name of my file is cp.cpp. So I will compile it by typing g++ cp.cpp, and we see that it compiled successfully. There are no errors. Now let's run the output file, which is a.exe. So if I run it, we see that the output is let's learn paired comments. So this is the only thing that got printed, and everything that is commented out is ignored by the compiler. So this is how we write paired comments. Alright, so with that I hope you understood how to write paired comments. Now with respect to paired comments, there is one more thing that we need to keep in mind. That is, comment pairs do not nest. Now what do we mean by this? So a comment begins with /* and it ends with the next */. Now as a result of this, one comment pair cannot appear inside another. That means this is a comment pair, and inside this you cannot put another comment pair because it will cause a problem. So let's see why. So let's take an example here. So here we have taken an example that is the same example that we took in the previous slide, and here we have written let's learn paired comments, and here I am trying to comment these lines. Okay. So here we see that the delimiter starts here and it ends over here. This is the starting, this is the ending. Now in between this I am trying to add one more line of comment. Here you see another paired comment. So here I am starting the delimiter again and ending it again. So basically this comment is inside this comment. So we see that there is nesting of comment pairs occurring. Now what will happen if we compile this program? Let's see. So here I have the same program. We see that this comment starts here and it ends over here, and in between there is another pair of comments which is starting here and ending here. Okay, now if I compile this program, let's see what happens. We open a new terminal and the name of our file is cpn.cpp. So I will compile it using g++ space cpn.cpp. So let's press enter and we see that it is throwing an error here. So it is saying expected primary expression before /. So what the compiler has actually done is it has treated this as the starting delimiter and this as the ending delimiter. So this is ignored. This is treated as a part of the comment text. So here it starts here and it ends here. So this is the actual pair that we have. Now up to here is commented out because this is starting, this is ending. Now here we see that now there is just an ending delimiter and there is no starting delimiter here. So because of that we see that nesting of comments cannot be done, and it is due to this that it has thrown an error. So that is why we say that nesting of comments is not possible. Okay, so I hope with that you understood why comment pairs do not nest. Okay, so with that we come to the end of comments. So I hope you understood what are comments and what are the types of comments that we have in C++.
Okay, so pagdating sa comment, ginagamit na rin, pareho lang nun sa C, yan din naman yung gamit natin, no? So meron siyang dalawa, yung una, yung double bar na and then ito, hyphen asterisk, and then yung kapartner niya asterisk hyphen, no? Ayan. So maidagdag ko lang, no? Maganda yung naglalagay ng comments sa inyong code, lalo na kung gusto niyo itong maging isang commercial na na application, at lalo na kung commercial yung application. Halimbawa lang, ang use niya lalo na dun sa mga magko-code, no? Yung mag-e-edit ng code, no? May nangyayari kasi sa industry, no? Lalo na pagka may mga update. Ito nangyayari sa code ng C++. May update sa application, no? Mahirap mag-update kung halimbawang walang comment, lalo na kung may mga babaguhin, no? So para siyang markers yung comment, no? Kung ano ba yung ginagawa ng code. So maganda yan, no? So i-reiterate ko lang kasi magiging programmer kayo balang araw, no? Or kaya bubuo kayo ng software, lagyan nyo naman ng comment para merong markers yung mga titingin. Kasi malay nyo naman, may benta nyo yan, tapos meron silang gustong ayusin one day. And then, pagka, kung walang markers yan, so medyo mahirap, no? Mahirap i-locate kung halimbawa may mga gustong i-edit dun sa program. Kaya maganda talaga na nilalagyan natin ng comment. Kasi that's also one way para maipakita natin yung pagkakasunod-sunod, halimbawa, kung procedural yung inyong inyong ginawang application or software, ayan. So, makakatulong talaga yan. And then, we should properly use yung paggamit ng comment. Okay, class. So, hindi na tayo masyadong magdadwell dyan kasi lagi naman natin ginagamit dyan. I guess we can end from here. Kasi 6:28 na. Alright. Sino nga yung taga-remind sa akin ng ng oras? Na andyan ba? Ng ating time. Timing.
Absent pa rin po si Tayone, ma'am.
Sorry?
Absent po si Tayone.
O yun nga, wala si Tayone. Pero 42 na tayo. Ibig sabihin, pag dumating si Tayone, 43. Tama?
Yes po.
Okay. So, madadagdagan tayo. So, dun sa groupings natin, may isang 8. Correct? So, saan nyo ilalagay si Tayone? Na-update mo ba? Nakasama si Tayone?
Sakto po kami, ma'am. 6 groups po with 7 members. Sali na po si Tayone po.
Talaga? Pero, okay. Kasama pala ako dun sa 42. Okay. Okay, medyo nalilito lang ako. Tama. Sorry. So, ayan. Okay. So, mag-unshare muna ako. Titingnan natin yung ating, Ayan. Unshare. Okay. Anyway, so, papaalalahanan na lang tayo ni Tayone pag, ng ating, Alam ko sinasabi rin dito sa, sa, kasi nakaset to ng nasabihin din ng timer ng MS Teams. Ayan. Anyway, okay. So, yun yung klase natin. Marami tayong natapos. Hanggang namespace. At saka comment. Dun sa ating C++. So, ang maano ko lang is, pwede kayong mag early readings. Andyan naman yung video kung gusto nyo mag early Tapos kung gusto nyo mag deep dive sa C++, na andyan yung libro ni Malik, pwede nyong basahin. Kasi hindi naman lahat mo-cover nung ating tutorial, no? So, at hindi rin naman natin pwedeng deep diving dito sa ating So, we cover whatever is given to us as a topic, no? So, kung gusto niyo mag-deep dive, no? Gusto niyo ma-master yung yung C++, nandiyan yung libro ni Malik, pwede niyo basahin. At marami ring other references na pwede niyo makita dun sa YouTube para dun sa advanced learning. Type niyo lang dun sa marami kayong tutorial na makikita regarding C++. But for now, dito tayo mag-end. Okay. Teka lang, kukuha ako ng as usual, yung ating screenshot. Ayan, sige. So, pwede bang makahingi ng video? Okay, mag-video muna tayo para makita yung ating mga face. Alam niyo naman. Yan na yung ating laging ginagawa, sanay na tayo dyan sa ating setting. Ayan. So, pakibuksan lang po yung inyong mga video para okay. Ayan. Naglilitawan na yung mga mukha natin, no? Ayan. Ayan. So, gising na gising pa ba tayo o inaantok na tayo? Si Kenneth talagang nakangiti. Gising na gising pa si Kenneth. Si Juan Miguel mukhang inaantok na. Patulog na. Patulog na ba, Juan Miguel? Kulang na lang. Ayan si Paula. Konti na lang, pipikit na. Ayan. Okay, so, ngiti-ngiti naman dyan. Ayan, ngiting-ngiting ngiting panalo. Ayan, diba? First meeting, ang dami nating natapos. Ayan. Iba talaga pagka magkakakilala na tayo, Ayan. So, hopefully one day magkita-kita tayo, sa October. Kayo ba ay in-approve? Kayo ba, yung mga magulang nyo ba ay naimbitahan dun sa meeting dati? Hindi. Yung grupo nyo, hindi. Okay, kasi may consensus. May
Yung
consensus.
BSIT.
Oo. Okay, yung consensus kasi tinatanong kung gusto nyo ba na na face-to-face 100%. So, medyo ang naging consensus ay 50%, no? 50% face-to-face, 50% online. Sige, bago tayo mag-print screen, tanong ko lang. Okay. Kayo ba na naandito ngayon, ano ba ang mas gusto ninyo? Face-to-face or online? Ayan.
Online po.
Online. Si Kenneth online. Si Paula, ano?
Online po, ma'am.
Online. Si Jessica?
Online for
Online
now
din.
po.
Si Benji?
Ma'am, maganda rin po sana face-to-face. Kaso, sa ngayon, ma'am, parang panig po ako sa online.
Okay. Si Juan Miguel, na inaantok na.
Kung parehas.
Online din. Si China? China, ikaw? Online or face-to-face?
Hindi po ako nakapag-decide.
Hindi pa siya makadecide. Okay. Si Angelo. Angelo, Basco.
Okay lang po kahit face-to-face or online.
Online, so walang problema. Si Jules, anong boto ni Jules?
Online po, ma'am.
Online. Si Jael, Jigs.
For now po, ma'am, online po.
Online, okay. Okay, so, kasi doon sa aking, usually, mas gusto ng bata na Pero, doon sa ibang klase, gusto nila face-to-face. Okay, so, hindi ko alam kung paano hahatiin ng school, at saka, kung sana naayos na nila yung, yung setting. So, mangyayari siguro, yung teacher nagtuturo ng meron siyang kaharap, yung kalahati, tapos, sa computer niya na andun yung online, no? So, medyo parang multitasking ang mangyayari sa teacher kung magsasabay sila. Or ano ba? Kasi sa Lasal, iba yung oras ng online, iba yung oras ng face-to-face. So, medyo mabigat, 'di ba? Mabigat. So, hindi ko alam kung paano gagawin ng PUP kung pagsasabayin ba nila yung online tsaka yung face-to-face. Pero dapat kung ganun, dapat maayos yung kanilang kanilang internet dun sa school, no? Yan. Hindi ko alam kung hindi pa kasi ako ng experience ng magturo dun sa PUP na face-to-face na para masabi ko kung maayos ba yung internet, no? Pero yan yung isang consideration. Kailangan maayos yung internet connection. Okay, so kunan ko na kayo ng print screen. Ayan. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Smile po dyan. Ayan. Okay. So, diba? Salamat ng marami. Okay, so, yan yung ating klase ngayong araw na to. Okay. Ano ba tong ginawa ko dito? Yung kaya pala Ayan. Okay. Salamat ng marami sa ating first day. Ang dami nating natapos. Hopefully, sa susunod, mas marami tayong matapos. Okay? Thank you very much for coming today. Everyone, see you again. Next meeting.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Ayan. So, pwede nyo nang pag-isipan yung mga gagawin nating projects. Okay. Thank you. Alright.
Thank you po.
Bye-bye. Si Paula yung yung attendance. Ayan.
Na-send ko na po yung attendance, ma'am,
Okay.
sa PM po.
Okay. Salamat. Sige. Kita-kits na lang next time. Bye-bye. Okay. Salamat din. Magli-leave na ako, ha? Bye na ako.